Wait, a chat from last time. Wow. All right. Just waiting for something. I forget what I was waiting for already. Some nonsense. I remember I was looking for the correct tag for this thing because it's. I mean, I do. I will chat with if somebody shows up. That would be good. You can see we're having a chat about Cushon, but there's also reading going on, and I saw there's a tag called "Reading Fun," and I don't know. Is this really reading fun? It is a quandary. That's a little weird. I made myself a little something something. Woo. Okay, anyway, I meant to start like 3 minutes ago, so I suppose I really need to get on this stuff. Where is everything? Okay, just making sure I got all my stuff in order. Marvelous. Oh. I meant to do that. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, it was on purpose. Okay, I'm done. Yeah. Oh, right. Yes. Right. Sorry. I was just testing you. Oh. Chapter 34. How Gargantua left the city of Paris to succor his country, and how Gymnast encountered with the enemy. In this very same hour, Gargantua, who was gone out of Paris as soon as he had read his father's letters, coming upon his great mare, had already passed the nunnery bridge, himself, Ponocrates, Gymnast, and Eudemon, who all three, the better to enable them to go along with him, took post horses. The rest of his train came after him by even journeys at a slower pace, bringing with them all his books and philosophical instruments. As soon as he had alighted at Paris, he was informed by a farmer of Guguet, anyway, how Picrochole had fortified himself within the Rock Clermont, and had sent Captain Tripet with a great army to set upon the wood of Vede and Vaugaudry, and that they had already plundered the whole country, not leaving cock nor hen, even as far as to the winepress of Billard. These strange and almost incredible news of the enormous abuses thus committed all over the land so affrighted Gargantua that he knew not what to say nor do. But Ponocrates counselled him to go unto the lord of Vauguyon, who at all times had been their friend and confederate, and that by him they should be better advised in their business. Which they did incontinently, and found him very willing and fully resolved to assist them, and therefore was the opinion that they should send some one of his company to scout along and discover the country, to learn in what condition and posture the enemy was, and that they might take counsel and proceed according to the present occasion. You leave a man's rooster alone. I think this is just a good advice in general. Whereupon it was concluded. Oh, hang on. Gymnast offered himself to go. I was startled because that's like a 5-word sentence. It's unthinkable. Gymnast offered himself to go, whereupon it was concluded that for his safety and the better expedition, he should have with him someone who knew the ways, avenues, turnings, windings, and rivers thereabout. Then away went he and Prelingo, the equerry or gentleman of Vauguion's horse, who scouted and espied as narrowly as they could upon all the quarters without any fear. In the meantime, Gargantua took a little refreshment, ate somewhat himself, the like did those who were with him, and caused to give to his mare a picotine of oats, that is, 14 quarters and 3 bushels. Gymnast and his comrade rode so long that at last they met with the enemy's forces, all scattered and out of order, plundering, stealing, robbing, and pillaging all they could lay their hands on. I think your long sentences are going to happen soon, though. And as far off as they could perceive him, they ran thronging upon the back of one another in all haste towards him, to unload him of his money and untruss his portmantles. Then cried he out unto them, My masters, I am a poor devil, I desire you to spare me. I have yet 1 crown left. Come, we must drink it, for it is aurum potabilia, and this horse here shall be sold to pay my welcome. Afterwards, take me for one of your own, for never yet was there any man that knew better how to take lard, roast, and dressed, yea, by God, to tear asunder and devour a hen, that I am here, and for my propitiate I drink to all good fellows. With that he unscrewed his borracho, which was a great Dutch leathern bottle, and without putting in his nose drank very honestly. The maroufle rogues looked upon him, opening their throats a foot wide, and putting out their tongues like greyhounds, in hopes to drink after him. But Captain Tripet, in the very nick of that their expectation, came running to him to see what it was. To him Gymnast offered his bottle, saying, Hold, captain, drink boldly and spare not. I have been thy taster. It is wine of La Fée Mongeau. What? Said Tripet. This good fellow jibes and flouts us? Who art thou? Said Tripet. I am, said Gymnast, a poor devil. Ha, said Tripet, seeing thou art a poor devil, it is reason that thou shouldst be permitted to go whithersoever thou wilt, for all poor devils pass everywhere without toll or tax. But it is not the custom of poor devils to be so well mounted. Therefore, sir devil, come down, and let me have your horse. If he do not carry me well, you, master devil, must do it. For I love a life that such a devil as you should carry me away. I feel a little flummoxed by that one. Book 1, Chapter 35. How Gymnast very souply and cunningly killed Captain Tripet and others of Picrochole's men. When they heard these words, some amongst them began to be afraid, and blessed themselves with both hands, thinking indeed that he had been a devil disguised, insomuch that one of them, named Good John, captain of the trained bands of the country bumpkins. Oh, all right, yay, good job. That makes sense. Captain of the trained bands of the country bumpkins, took his psalter out of his codpiece, and cried aloud, Hagios ho Theos! If thou be of God, speak. If thou be of the other spirit, avoid hence and get thee going. Yet he went not away, which words being heard by all the soldiers that were there, divers of them being a little inwardly terrified, departed from the place. All this did Gymnast very well remark and consider, and therefore making as if he would have alighted from off his horse, as he was poising himself on the mounting side, he most nimbly, with his short sword by his thigh, shifting his foot in the stirrup, performed the stirrup leather feat, whereby, after the inclining of his body downwards, he forthwith launched himself aloft in the air, and placed both his feet together on the saddle, standing upright with his back turned toward the horse's head. Now, said he, my case goes backward. Then suddenly, in the very same posture wherein he was, he fetched a gambol upon one foot, and turning to the left hand, failed not to carry his body perfectly round, just into its former stance, without missing one jot. Ha, said Tripet, I will not do that at this time, and not without cause. Well, said Gymnast, I have failed. I will undo this leap. Then with a marvelous strength and agility, turning towards the right hand, he fetched another frisking gambol as before, which done, he set his right hand thumb upon the hind bow of the saddle, raised himself up, and sprung into the air, poising and upholding his whole body upon the muscle and nerve of the said thumb, and so turned and whirled himself about 3 times. At the 4th, reversing his body, and overturning it upside down and foresight back, without touching anything, he brought himself betwixt the horse's 2 ears, springing with all his body into the air, upon the thumb of his left hand, and in that posture, turning like a windmill, did most actively do that trick which is called the miller's pass. After this, clapping his right hand flat upon the middle of the saddle, he gave himself such a jerking swing that he thereby seated himself upon the crupper, after the manner of gentlewomen sitting on horseback. This done, he easily passed his right leg over the saddle, and placed himself like one that rides in croup. But, said he, it were better for me to get into the saddle. Then putting the thumbs of both hands upon the crupper before him, and thereupon leaning himself, as upon the only supporters of his body, he continently turned heels over head in the air, and straightforward found himself betwixt the bow of the saddle in a good settlement. Then, with a somersault springing into the air again, he fell to stand with both his feet close together upon the saddle, and there made above 100 frisks, turns, and demi-pomades, with his arms held out across, and in so doing cried out aloud, I rage! Devils! I am stark mad! Devils! I am mad! Hold me! Devils! Hold me! Hold, devils! Hold! Whilst he was thus vaulting, the rogues in great astonishment said to one another, By cock's death! He is a goblin or a devil thus disguised. Ab host maligno libera nos domine, and ran away in a full flight, as if they had been routed, looking now and then behind them, like a dog that carrieth away a goose-wing in his mouth. Oh, goose-wing. I think they do have guns, so I guess, and then we'll see what happens to Gymnast. Okay, then Gymnast, spying his advantage, alighted from his horse, drew his sword, and laid on great blows upon the thick-set and highest crested among them, and overthrew them in great heaps, hurt, wounded, and bruised, being resisted by nobody, they thinking he had been a starved devil, and as well in regard of his wonderful feats in vaulting, which they had seen, as for the talk Tripet had with him, calling him poor devil. Only Tripet would have traitorously cleft his head with his horseman's sword, or lance knight falchion, but he was well armed, and felt nothing of the blow but the weight of the stroke. Whereupon, turning suddenly about, he gave Tripet a home thrust, and upon the back of that, whilst he was about to ward his head from a slash, he ran him in at the breast with a hit, which at once cut his stomach, the fifth gut called the colon, and the half of his liver, wherewith he fell to the ground, and in falling gushed forth above 4 pottles of pottage, and his soul mingled with the pottage. This done, Gymnast withdrew himself, very wisely considering that a case of great adventure and hazard should not be pursued unto its utmost period, and that it becomes all cavaliers modestly to use their good fortune, without troubling or stretching it too far. Wherefore, getting to horse, he gave him the spur, taking the right way unto Vauguyon and Prélégon with him. So I guess he was all, look how tricky I am. Stab, stab! Wow, that looks like a bunch of dead people. Chapter 36. How Gargantua demolished the castle at the Fort of Vade, and how they passed the ford. As soon as he came, he related the estate and condition wherein they had found the enemy, and the stratagem which he alone had used against all their multitude, affirming that they were but rascally rogues, plunderers, thieves, and robbers, ignorant of all military discipline, and that they might boldly set forward unto the field, it being an easy matter to fell and strike them down like beasts. Then Gargantua mounted his great mare, accompanied as we have said before, and in fighting in his way a high and great tree, which commonly was called by the name of St. Martin's tree, because heretofore St. Martin planted a pilgrim's staff there, which in tract of time grew to that height and greatness, said, This is that which I lacked. This tree shall serve me both for staff and lance. With that he pulled it up easily, plucked off the boughs, and trimmed it at his pleasure. In the meantime, his mare pissed to ease her belly, but it was in such abundance that it did overflow the country 7 leagues, and all the piss of that urinal flood ran glib away toward the Fort of Vide, Ved, wherewith the water was so swollen with all the forces the enemy had there, were with great horror drowned, except some who had taken the way on the left hand toward the hills. So once again, people dying in piss. Gargantua, being come to the place of the wood of Ved, was informed by Eudemon that there were some remainder of the enemy within the castle, which, to know, Gargantua cried out as loud as he was able, "Are you there, or are you not there? If you be there no more, and if you are not there, I have no more to say." But a ruffian gunner, whose charge was to attend the portcullis over the gate, let fly a cannonball at him, and hit him with that shot most furiously on the right temple of his head, yet did him no more hurt than if he had but cast a prune or kernel of a wine grape at him. "What is this?" said Gargantua. "Do you throw at us grape kernels here? The vintage shall cost you dear," thinking indeed that the bullet had been the kernel of a grape or a raisin kernel. Those who were within the castle, being till then busy at the pillage, when they heard this noise, ran to the towers and fortresses, from whence they shot at him above 9,025 falcon-shot and arquebusiades, aiming all at his head, and so thick did they shoot at him that he cried out, "Ponocrates, my friend, these flies here are like to put out mine eyes. Give me a branch of those willow trees to drive them away," thinking that the bullets and stones shot out of the great ordnance had been but dun flies. Ponocrates looked and saw that there were no other flies but great shot which they had shot from the castle. Then was it that he rushed with his great tree against the castle, and with mighty blows overthrew both towers and fortresses, and laid all level with the ground, by which means all that were within were slain and broken in pieces. Going from thence, they came to the bridge at the mill, where they found all the fort covered with dead bodies, so thick that they had choked up the mill and stopped the current of its water. And these were those that were destroyed in the urinal deluge of the mare. There they were at a stand, consulting how they might pass without hindrance by these dead carcasses. But Gymnast said, "If the devils have passed there, I will pass well enough." "The devils have passed there," said Eudemon, "to carry away the damned souls." "By Saint Tregna," said Ponocrates, "then by necessary consequence he shall pass there." "Yes, yes," said Gymnasts, "or I shall stick in the way." Then setting spurs to his horse, he passed through freely, his horse not fearing nor being anything affrighted by the sight of the dead bodies, for he had accustomed him, according to the doctrine of Aelian, not to fear armor, nor the carcasses of dead men, and that not by killing men as Diomedes did the Thracians, or as Ulysses did in throwing the corpses of his enemies at his horse's feet, as Homer saith, but by putting Jaculent amongst his hay, and making him go over it ordinarily when he gave him his oats. The other three followed him very close, except Eudemon only, whose horse's fore-right or far forefoot sank up to the knee in the paunch of a great fat chuff, who lay there upon his back drowned, and could not get it out. There he was pestered until Gargantua, with the end of his staff, thrust down the rest of the villain's tripes into the water, whilst the horse pulled out his foot, which is a great wonderful thing in hippiatry. The said horse was thoroughly cured of a ring bone which he had in that foot by this touch of the burst guts of that great looby. That's kind of nasty too. Ooh. Yeah, that's a little much. Chapter 37. How Gargantua, in combing his head, made the great cannonballs fall out of his hair. Being come out of the river Ved, they came very shortly after to Grangousier's castle, who waited for them with great longing. At their coming they were entertained with many congees, and cherished with embraces. Never was seen a more joyful company, for the supplementum supplementi chronicorum saith that Gargamel died there with joy. For my part, truly I cannot tell, nor do I care very much for her, nor for anyone else. The truth was that Gargantua, in shifting his clothes, and combing his head with a comb, which was 900 foot long of the Jewish cane measure, and whereof the teeth were great tusks of elephants, whole and entire, he made fall at every rake above 7 balls of bullets, at a dozen the ball, that stuck in his hair at the raising of the castle of the Wood of Ved, which his father Grangousier seeing, thought they had been lice, and said unto him, What, my dear son, hast thou brought us this far some short-winged hawks of the college of Montaigne? I did not mean that thou shouldst reside here. Then answered Ponocrates, my sovereign lord, I mean, think not that I have placed him in that lousy college which they call Montaigne. Rather, I have put him amongst the grave diggers of Sanct Innocent. So enormous is the cruelty and villainy that I have known there. For the galley slaves are far better used amongst the Moors and Tartars, the murderers in the criminal dungeons, yea, the very dogs in your house, than are the poor wretched students in the aforesaid college. And if I were king of Paris, the devil take me, if I would not set it on fire and burn both principal and regents, for suffering this inhumanity to be exercised before their eyes. Then, taking up one of the bullets, said he, These are cannon shot, which your son Gargantua hath lately received by the treachery of your enemies, as he was passing before the Wood of Ved. But they have been so rewarded that they are all destroyed in the ruin of the castle, as were the Philistines by the policy of Samson, and those whom the tower of Siloam slew, as it is written in the 13th of Luke. My opinion is that we pursue them whilst the luck is on our side, for occasion hath all her hair on her forehead. When she is past, you may not recall her. She hath no tuft whereby you can lay hold on her, for she is bald in the hind part of her head, and never returneth again. Truly, said Grangousier, it shall not be at this time, for I will make you a feast this night and bid you welcome. This said, they made ready supper, and of extraordinary besides his daily fare, were roasted 16 oxen, 3 heifers, 32 calves, 63 fat kids, fourscore and 15 wethers, 300 farrow pigs, or sheets soused in sweet wine or must, 11 score partridges, 700 snipes and woodcocks, 400 Loudun and Cornwall capons, 6,000 pullets, and as many pigeons, 600 crammed hens, 1,400 leverets, or young hares and rabbits, 303 buzzards, 1,700 cockerels. For venison, they could not so suddenly come by it, only 11 wild boars, which the abbot of Turpinay sent, and 18 fallow deer, which the lord of Gramont bestowed, together with 70 pheasants, which were sent by the lord of Essars, and some dozens of queests, cowshats, ringdoves, and woodculvers, river fowl, teals and aw-teals, bitterns, courts, plovers, francolins, briganders, tirazons, young lapwings, tame ducks, shovelers, woodlanders, herons, moorhens, creels, storks, canepetiers, oranges, flamans, which are phanicopters or crimson-winged seafowls, terragols, turkeys, arbons, coots, solan geese, curlews, termagants, and water wagtails, with a great deal of cream, curds, and fresh cheese, and store of soup, pottages, and brewies with great variety. Phanicopters. It's, I've already lost it. It's, here, I'm just going to copy and paste it, so you may enjoy it. Without doubt, there was meat enough, and it was handsomely dressed by Snap Sauce, Hotchpot, and Braver Juice, Grangousier's cooks. Jenkin, Trudge Apace, and Clean Glass were very careful to fill them drink. A phanicopter. I don't know what a phanicopter is, and I don't know how to feel about it. Uh-oh. Chapter 38. How Gargantua did eat up 6 pilgrims in a salad. The story requireth that we relate that which happened unto 6 pilgrims who came from Sebastian, near to Nantes, and who for shelter that night, being afraid of the enemy, had hid themselves in the garden upon the chichling peas, among the cabbages and lettuces. Gargantua, finding himself somewhat dry, asked whether they could get any lettuce to make him a salad, and hearing that there were the greatest and fairest in the country, for there were as great as plum trees or as walnut trees, he would go thither himself, and brought thence in his hand what he thought good, and withal carried away the 6 pilgrims, who were in so great fear that they dare not speak to laugh, that they did not dare to speak nor cough. Washing them, therefore, first at the fountain, the pilgrims said to one another softly, "What shall we do? We are almost drowned here amongst these lettuce. Shall we speak? But if we speak, he will kill us for spies." And as they were thus deliberating what to do, Gargantua put them with the lettuce into a platter of the house, as large as the huge tun of the white fires of the Cistercian order, which done, with oil, vinegar, and salt, he ate them up, to refresh himself a little before supper, and had already swallowed up 5 of the pilgrims, the 6th being in the platter, totally hid under a lettuce, except his bourdon or staff that appeared, and nothing else. Which Grangousier, seeing, said to Gargantua, "I think that is the horn of a shell snail. Do not eat it." "Why not?" said Gargantua. "They are all good this month. They were good all this month." Which he no sooner said, but drawing up the staff, and therewith taking up the pilgrim, he ate him very well, then drank a terrible draught of the excellent white wine. The pilgrims, thus devoured, made shift to save themselves as well as they could by withdrawing their bodies out of the reach of the grinders of his teeth, but they could not escape from thinking that they had been put in the lowest dungeon of a prison. And when Gargantua whiffed the great draught, they thought to have been drowned in his mouth, and the flood of wine had almost carried them away into the gulf of his stomach. Nevertheless, skipping with their bourdons, as St. Michael's palmers used to do, they sheltered themselves from the danger of that inundation under the banks of his teeth. But one of them, by chance, groping or sounding the country with a staff, to try whether they were in safety or no, struck hard against the cleft of a hollow tooth, and hit the mandibulary sinew or nerve of the jaw, which put Gargantua to a very great pain, so that he began to cry for the rage that he felt. To ease himself, therefore, of his smarting ache, he called for his tooth-picker, and rubbing toward a young walnut tree, where they lay skulking, unnestled you, my gentlemen pilgrims. For he had caught one by the legs, another by the scrip, another by the pocket, another by the scarf, and another by the band of the breeches, and the poor fellow that had hurt him with the bourdon, him he had hooked to him by the codpiece, which snatch nevertheless did him a great deal of good, for it pierced unto him a pocky botch he had received in the groin, which grievously tormented him ever since they were past Assanis. The pilgrims, thus dislodged, ran away athwart the plain at a pretty fast pace, and the pain ceased, even just at the time when by Eudaemon he was called to supper, for all was ready. "I will go then," said he, "and piss away my misfortune," which he did do in such a copious measure that the urine taking away the feet from the pilgrims, they were carried along with the stream unto the bank of a tuft of trees. Man, I feel bad for those pilgrims. Upon which, as soon as they had taken footing, and that for the self-preservation they had run a little out of the road, they on a sudden fell all 6, except Fournier, who broke all the snares and ropes. Being gone from thence, they lay all the rest of that night in a lodge near unto Coudray, where they were comforted in their miseries by the gracious words of one of their company, called Sweer to Go, who showed them that this adventure had been foretold by the prophet David, Psalm cum exurgent homines and blah blah blah, when we were eaten in the salad with salt, oil, and vinegar. Quim mirascator furor minos, when he drank the great draught. Torrentium perscivit anima nostrum, when the stream of his water carried us to the thicket. Blah, 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 more Latin. That is, the water of his urine, the flood whereof, cutting our way, took our feet from us. Benedictus Dominus Kino, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, when we fell into the trap. Adjutium nostrum, etc. I did not feel like reading Latin. even if it's bad Latin. Book 1, Chapter 39. How the monk was feasted by Gargantua, and of the jovial discourse they had at supper. When Gargantua sat down at the table, after all of them had somewhat stayed their stomachs by a snatch or two of the first bits eaten heartily, Grangousier began to relate the source and cause of the war raised between him and Picrochole, and came to tell how Friar John of the Funnels had triumphed at the defense of the close of the abbey, and extolled him for his valor above Camillus, Scipio, Pompey, Caesar, and Themistocles. Then Gargantua desired that he might be presently sent for, to the end that with him they might consult of what was to be done. Whereupon, by a joint consent, his steward went for him, and brought him along merrily, with his staff of the cross, upon Grangousier's mule. When he was come, 1,000 huggings, 1,000 embracements, 1,000 good days were given. Ha, Friar John, my friend Friar John, my brave cousin Friar John, from the devil, let me clip thee, my heart, about the neck, to me an armful. I must grip thee, my ballock, till thy back crack with it. Come, my cod, let me call thee till I kill thee. And Friar John, the gladdest man in the world, never was man made welcomer, never was any more courteously and graciously received than Friar John. Come, come, said Gargantua, still here, close by me at this end. I am content, said the monk, seeing you will have it so. Some water, page, fill, my boy, fill, it is to refresh my liver. Give me some, child, to gargle my throat withal. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Disposita cappa, said Gymnast. Let us pull off this frock. Ho, by God, gentlemen, said the monk. There's a chapter in Statutus Ordinus which opposeth my laying of it down. Pish, said Gymnast. A fig for your chapter. This frock breaks both your shoulders. Put it off. My friend, said the monk, let me alone with it, for by God I'll drink the better that it is on. It makes all my body jocund. If I should lay it aside, the waggish pages would cut to themselves garters out of it, as I was once served at Coulanges. And which is worse, I shall lose my appetite. But if in this habit I sit down at the table, I will drink, by God, both to thee and to thy horse. And so courage, frolic, God save the company. I have already supped, yet I will eat never a whit the less for that, for I have a paved stomach, as hollow as a butt of Malvoisie, or Saint Benedict's boot, and always open like a lawyer's pouch. Of all fishes but the tench, take the wing of a partridge or the thigh of a nun. Doth not he die like a good fellow that dies with a stiff catso? Our prior loves exceedingly the white of a capon. In that, said Gymnast, he doth not resemble the foxes. For of the capons, hens, and pullets which they carried away, they never eat the white. Why? Said the monk. Because, said Gymnast, they have no cooks to dress them, and if they not be completely made ready, they remain red and not white, the redness of meats being a token that they have not got enough of the fire, whether by boiling, roasting, or otherwise, except the shrimps, lobsters, crabs, and crayfishes, which are cardinalized with boiling. By God's feast gazers, said the monk, the porter of our abbey then hath not his head well boiled, for his eyes are as red as a mazer made of an alder tree. The thigh of this leveret is good for those that have the gout. To the purpose of the truel, what is the reason that the thighs of a gentlewoman are always fresh and cool? This problem, said Gargantua, is neither in Aristotle, in Alexander Aphrodisius, nor in Plutarch. There are 3 causes, said the monk, by which that place is naturally refreshed. Primo, because the water runs all along by it. Secundo, because it is a shady place, obscure and dark, upon which the sun never shines. And thirdly, because it is continually flabelled, blown upon, and aired by the north winds of the whole Arctic, the fan of the smock, and flip-flap of the codpiece. And lusty, my lads. Jeez. Wow. Wow, look at this. And lest ye, my lads, some bowsing liquor, page. So, crack, crack, crack. Oh, how good is God that gives us of this excellent juice. I call him to witness. If I had been in the time of Jesus Christ, I would have kept him from being taken by the Jews in the gardens of Olivet. And the devil fail me if I should have failed to cut off the hams of those gentlemen apostles who ran away so basely after they had well supped and left their good master in the lurch. I hate that man worse than poison that offers to run away when he should fight and lay stoutly about him. Oh, that I were but king of France for 80 or 100 years. By God, I should whip like curtailed dogs these runaways of Pavia. A plague take them! Why did they not choose rather to die there than to leave their good prince in that pinch and necessity? Is it not better and more honourable to perish in fighting valiantly than to live in disgrace by a cowardly running away? We are like to eat no great store of goslings this year. Therefore, friend, reach me some of that roasted pig there. Diavolo, is there no more must? No more sweet wine? Je m'y radix jes, je renie ma vie, je meurs de soif. I renounce my life, I rage for thirst. Actually, I'm dying of thirst, but anyway. This wine is none of the worst. What wine drink you at Paris? I give myself to the devil if I did not once keep open house at Paris for all comers 6 months together. Do you know Friar Claude of the High Kilderkins? Oh, the good fellow that he is. But I do not know what fly hath stung him of late. He is become so hard a student. For my part, I study not at all. In our abbey, we never study for fear of the mumps, which disease in horses is called mourning in the chine. Excuse me. Our late abbot was wont to say that it is a monstrous thing to see a learned monk. By God, master, my friend, Magis Magnus Clericos non sunt magis manor sapiens. You never saw so many hares as there are this year. I could not anywhere come by a goshawk nor tassel of falcon. My lord Beloniard promised me a lanner, but he wrote to me not long ago that he was become Percy. The partridges will so multiply henceforth that they will go near to eat up our ears. I take no delight in the stalking horse, for I catch such cold that I am like to founder myself at that sport. If I do not run, toil, travel, and trot about, I am not well at ease. True it is that in leaping over the hedges and bushes, my frock leaves always some of its wool behind it. I have recovered a dainty greyhound. I give him to the devil if he suffer a hare to escape. A groom was leading him to my hare Hunt Little, and I robbed him of it. Did I ill? No, Friar John, said Gymnus. No, by all the devils that are, no. So, said the monk, do I attest that these same devils, so long as they last, or rather, virtue of God, what could that gouty limpard have done with so fine a dog? By the body of God, he is better pleased when one presents him with a good yoke of oxen. How now, said Ponocrates. You swear, Friar John. It is only, said the monk, but to grace and adorn my speech. They are the colors of a Ciceronian rhetoric. Oh. Was Cicero known for cussing a lot? I don't really know a lot about Cicero. Well, if I remember, we'll check it later. Oh, yeah. I just remember he wasn't called upon to help assassinate Caesar because they thought him a little bit too cautious and kind of old. Didn't do him any good. They cut off his head and hands at the end anyway. I mean, somebody did, I don't remember. This, I didn't drink a whole lot of this drink, and I'm really feeling it. I've kind of set it aside. Whew. Chapter 40. Why monks are the outcasts of the world, and wherefore some have bigger noses than others. By the faith of a Christian, said Eudemon, I do wonderfully dote and enter in a great ecstasy when I consider the honesty and good fellowship of this monk. For he makes us here all merry. How is it, then, that they exclude the monks from all good companies, calling them feast troublers, marrers of mirth, and disturbers of all civil conversation, as the bees drive away the drones from their hives. Ignavam fucus picus, said Maro, a precipice arsent. Yeah, that's word, precibus. Whatever. Hereunto, answered Gargantua, there is nothing so true as that the frock and cowl draw unto itself the opprobrities, injuries, and maledictions of the world, just as the wind called Cisseus attracts the clouds. The peremptory reason is because they eat the ordure and excrements of the world, that is to say, the sins of the people, and, like dung-chewers and excrementitious eaters, they are cast into the privies in successive places, that is, the convents and abbeys, separated from political conversation, as the jakes and retreats of a house are. But if you conceive how an ape in a family is always mocked and provokingly incensed, you shall easily apprehend how monks are shunned of all men, both young and old. The ape keeps not the house as a dog doth, he draws not in the plough as the ox, he yields neither milk nor wool as the sheep, he carrieth no burden as a horse doth. That which he doth is only to concite, spoil, and defile all, which is the cause wherefore he hath of all men mocks, frumperies, and bastinadoes. After the same manner a monk, I mean those lither, idle, lazy monks, doth not labor and work, as do the peasant and artificer, doth not ward and defend the country, as doth a man of war, cureth not the sick and diseased, as the physician doth neither preach nor teach, as do the evangelical doctors and schoolmasters, doth not import commodities and things necessary for the commonwealth, as the merchant doth. Therefore it is that by and of all men that they are hooted at, hated, and abhorred. Yea, but, said Grangus, yea, they pray to God for us. Nothing less, answered Gargantua. True it is that with a tingle-tangle jangling of bells they trouble and disquiet all their neighbors about them. Right, said the monk, a mass, a matin, a vesper well rung, are half said. They mumble a great store of legends and psalms, by them not at all understood. They say many paternosters, interlarded with Ave Maries, without thinking upon or apprehending the meaning of what it is they say, which truly I call mocking of God, and not prayers. But so help them God, as they pray for us, and not for being afraid to lose their victuals, their manchots, and good fat pottage. Potage? All true Christians, of all estates and conditions, in all places and at all times, send up their prayers to God, and the mediator prayeth and intercedeth for them, and God is gracious to them. Now, such a one is our good Friar John. Therefore every man desireth to have him in his company. He is no bigot or hypocrite. He is not torn and divided betwixt reality and appearance, no wretch of a rugged and peevish disposition, but honest, jovial, resolute, and a good fellow. He travels, he labors, he defends the oppressed, comforts the afflicted, helps the needy, and keeps the close of the abbey. I thought with just one T it would have been potage, but there were two T's, so it looks like pottage to me. Just, it's English. They're still learning how to write it. Okay. Nay, said the monk, I do a great deal more than that, for whilst we are in dispatching our matins and anniversaries in the choir, I make withal some crossbow strings, polish glass bottles and bolts, I twist lines and weave purse nets wherein to catch conies. I am never idle. But now, hither come, some drink here, bring the fruit. These chestnuts are of the wood of Estrox, and with good new wine are able to make you a fine cracker and composer of bum sonnets. What? You're a bum sonnet. You are not, as yet, it seems, well moistened in this house with the sweet wine and must. By God, I drink to all men freely, and at all fords, like a proctor or promoter's horse. Friar John, said Gymnast, take away the snot that hangs at your nose. Ha ha, said the monk, am I not in danger of drowning, seeing I am in water even to the nose? No, quia, though some water come out from thence, there never goes in any, for it is well antidoted with pot-proof armor and syrup of the vine leaf. O my friend, he that hath winter boots made of such leather may boldly fish for oysters, for they will never take water. What is the cause, said Gargantua, that Friar John hath such a fair nose? Because, said Grangousier, that God would have it so, who frameth us in such form and for such end as is most agreeable with his divine will, even as a potter fashioneth his vessels. Because, said Ponocrates, he came with the first to the fair of noses, and therefore made choice of the fairest and the greatest. Pish, said the monk, that is not the reason of it, but according to the true monastical philosophy, it is because my nurse had soft teats, by virtue whereof, whilst she gave me suck, my nose did sink in so at... Wow, I gotta try that again. Whilst she gave me suck, my nose did sink in as so much... My nose did sink in as in so much butter. Took me 3 tries. The hard breasts of nurses make children short-nosed. But hey, gay, ad formum nasi cognoscitur ad te levavi. I never eat any confections page, whilst I am at the bibbery. Item, bring me rather some toasts. Chapter 41. How the monk made Gargantua sleep, and of his hours and breviaries. Supper being ended, they consulted of the business in hand, and concluded that about midnight they should fall unawares upon the enemy, to know what manner of watch and ward they kept, and that in the meanwhile they should take a little rest the better to refresh themselves. But Gargantua could not sleep by any means, on which side soever he turned himself. Whereupon the monk said to him, I never sleep soundly but when I am at sermon or prayers. Let us therefore begin, you and I, the 7 penitential psalms, to try whether you shall not quickly fall asleep. The conceit pleased Gargantua very well, and beginning the first of these psalms, as soon as they came to the words, Beati quorum, they fell asleep, both the one and the other. But the monk, for his being formerly accustomed to the hour of claustral matins, failed not to wake a little before midnight, and, being up himself, awaked all the rest in singing aloud, with a full clear voice, the song, Awake, Oranian, ho, awake! Awake, Oranian, ho! Get up, you no more sleep must take. Cut up, for we must go. When they were all roused and up, he said, My masters, it is a usual saying, that we begin matins with coughing and supper with drinking. Let us now, in doing clean contrarily, begin our matins with drinking, and at night before supper we shall cough as hard as we can. What, said Gargantua, to drink so soon after sleep? This is not to live according to the diet and prescript rules of the physicians, for you ought first to scour and cleanse your stomach of all its superfluities and excrements. Oh, well physicked, said the monk. 100 devils leap into my body, if there be not more old drunkards than old physicians. Hi, Montreth. I have made this paction and covenant with my appetite, that it always lieth down and goes to bed with myself. For to that I give every day, and for to that I every day give very good order. Then the next morning it also rises with me and gets up when I am awake. Mind you your charges, gentlemen, or tend your cures as much as you will. I will get me to my drawer, in terms of falconry, my tiring. What drawer or tiring do you mean? Said Gargantua. My breviary, said the monk, for just as the falconers, before they feed their hawks, do make them draw at a hen's leg to purge their brains of phlegm and sharpen them to a good appetite, so by taking this merry little breviary in the morning, I scour all my lungs, and am presently ready to drink. After what manner, said Gargantua, do you say these fair hours and prayers of yours? After the manner of Whipfield, Fescamp, and corruptly Facin, said the monk, by 3 psalms and 3 lessons, or nothing at all, he that will. I never tie myself to hours, prayers, and sacraments, for they are made for the men, and not the man for them. Therefore is it that I make my prayers in fashion of stirrup leathers. I shorten or lengthen them when I think good. Brevis oratio penetrat caelo se longa potatio evacuat scyphos. And you did miss the bum sonnets. Where is that written? By my faith, said Ponocrates, I cannot tell, my pillicock, but thou art more worth than gold. Therein, said the monk, I am like you, but venite apotemus. Then made they ready store of carbonados, or rashers on the coals, and good fat soups, or brewis with sippets, and the monk drank what he pleased. Some kept him company, and the rest did forbear, for their stomachs were not as yet opened. Afterwards every man began to arm and befit himself for the field. And they armed the monk against his will, for he desired no other armor for back and breast but his frock, nor any other weapon in his hand but the staff of the cross. Yet at their pleasure he was completely armed cap a pie, and mounted upon one of the best horses in the kingdom, with a good slashing shable by his side, together with Gargantua, Ponocrates, Gymnast, Eudemon, and 25 more of the most resolute and adventurous of Grangousier's house, all armed at proof with their lances in their hands, mounted like St. George, and every one of them having an arquebusier behind him. Chapter, it's like quickly mentally calculating the Roman numerals. 42. How the monk encouraged his fellow champions, and how he hanged upon a tree. He doesn't look that big, that giant, considering they headshot him with cannons. Thus went out those valiant champions on their adventure, in full resolution to know what enterprise they should undertake, and what to take heed of, and look well to in the day of the great and horrible battle. And the monk encouraged them, saying, My children, do not fear nor doubt. I will conduct you safely. God and Saint Benedict be with us. If I had strength answerable to my courage by's death, I would plume them for you like ducks. I fear nothing but the great ordinance, yet I know of a charm by way of prayer, which the subsecton of our abbey taught me, that will preserve a man from the violence of guns and all manner of fire weapons and engines. But it will do me no good, because I do not believe it. Nevertheless, I hope my staff of the cross shall this day play devilish pranks amongst them. Sorry, I'm missing the words. By God, whoever of our party shall offer to play the duck and shrink when blows are a-dealing, I give myself to the devil, if I do not make a monk of him in my stead, and hamper him within my frock, which is a sovereign cure against cowardice. Did you never hear of my lord Merles, his greyhound, which was not worth a straw in the fields? He put a frock about his neck, by the body of God. There was never hare nor fox that could escape him. And, which is more, he lined all the bitches in the country, though before that he was feeble-reined and ex frigidis et maleficiatis. That'll do. The monk uttering these words in choler, as he passed under a walnut tree, in his way toward the causey, he broached the visor of his helmet on the stump of a great branch of the said tree. Nevertheless, he set his spurs so fiercely to the horse, who was so full of mettle and quick on the spur, that he bounded forward, and the monk going about to ungrapple his visor, let go of his hold of the bridle, and so hanged by his hand upon the bow, whilst his horse stole away from under him. That's how you pronounce it. Blah, blah, blah. By this means was the monk left hanging on the walnut tree, and crying for help, murder, murder, swearing also that he was betrayed. Eudemon perceived him first, and calling Gargantua, said, Sir, come and see Absalom hanging. Gargantua, being come, considered the countenance of the monk, and in what posture he hanged. Wherefore he said to Eudemon, You are mistaken in comparing him to Absalom. For Absalom hung by his hair, but this shaveling monk hangeth by the ears. Help me, said the monk. In the devil's name, is this a time for you to prate? You seem to me to be like the decretalist preachers, who say that whosoever shall see his neighbor in the danger of death ought, upon pain of trisilk excommunication, rather choose to admonish him to make his confession to a priest, and put his conscience in the state of peace, than otherwise to help and relieve him. And therefore when I shall see them fallen into a river, and ready to be drowned, I shall make them a fair long sermon de tu mundi, and fuga saculi, and when they are stark dead, shall then go to their aid, and succour in fishing after them. Be quiet, said Gymnast, and stir not, my minion. I am now coming to unhang thee and set thee at freedom, for thou art a pretty little gentle Monachus. Monachus in claustro non valet blah 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 blah. I've seen about 500 hanged, but I never saw any have a better countenance in his dangling and pendulatory swagging. Swag! Truly, if I had so good a one, I would willingly hang thus all my lifetime. What, said the monk, have you almost done preaching? Help me in the name of God, seeing you will not in the name of the other spirit, or by the habit which I swear, you shall repent it. The gymnast alighted from his horse, and, climbing up the walnut tree, lifted up the monk with one hand by the gussets of his armor under the armpits, and with the other undid his visor from the stump of the broken branch. Which done, he let him fall to the ground and himself after. As soon as the monk was down, he put off all his armor, and threw away one piece after another about the field, and taking to him again his staff of the cross, remounted up to his horse, which Eudemon had caught in his running away. Then went they on merrily, riding along on the highway. Well, it's not just a lot of words from somebody hanging from the tree. It's kind of like, just freaking unhook me, you jackanapes. And they are still busy talking rather than, Anyway. Don't show people. Tell them, right? Chapter 43. How the scouts and foreparty of Picrochole were met with by Gargantua, and how the monk slew Captain Drawforth, and was then taken prisoner by his enemies. That length of that lance is just amusing right now. Picrochole, at the relation of those who had escaped out of the broil and defeat wherein Tripet was untriped. Maybe he's tripet. So we anyway. Grew very angry that the devils should have so run upon his men, and held all that night a council of war, at which Rash Calf and Touch Faucet concluded his power to be such that he was able to defeat all the devils of hell if they should come to jostle with his forces. This Picrochole did not fully believe, though he doubted not much of it. Therefore he sent under the command and conduct of the Count Drawforth for discovering of the country the number of 1,600 horsemen, all well mounted upon light horses for skirmish, and thoroughly besprinkled with holy water. And everyone for the field marker cognizance had the sign of a star in his scarf, to serve at all the adventurers, in case they should happen to encounter with devils, that by the virtue, as well of that Gregorian water as of the stars which they wore, they might make them disappear and evanish. In this equipage, they made an excursion upon the country till they came near to the Vauguyon, which is the valley of Guyon, and to the Spital, but could never find anybody to speak unto. Whereupon they returned a little back, and took occasion to pass above the aforesaid hospital, to try what intelligence they could come by in those parts. In which resolution riding on, and by chance in a pastoral lodge or shepherd's cottage near to Coudray, hitting upon the 5 pilgrims, they carried them way-bound and manacled, as if they had been spies. Man, those pilgrims just don't get a break. Since some of you missed it, there were a number of pilgrims, and they hid by some lettuces, and then Gargantua decided what he really wanted was to make a salad. So he ate the lettuces and swallowed the pilgrims. But they managed to grab onto his teeth and then nearly got washed down his gullet by a big gulp of wine, until one of them kind of jammed his staff into Gargantua's gums, in which he was like, ow! And then toothpicked them all out and flung them away. And then had a piss. And then the piss basically washed them down the road. And then they're like, wow, this is terrible. And then, anyway, now we're here. Okay. Carried the way bound and manacled. As if they had been spies, for all the exclamations, adjurations, and requests that they could make. And Yeah, I'm glad I've never done a pilgrimage. My mother, having done a couple, was pretty hardcore. Being come down from thence towards Seville, they were heard by Gargantua, who said then unto those that were with him, Comrades and fellow soldiers, we have here met with an encounter, and they are 10 times in number more than we. Shall we charge them or no? What a devil, said the monk. Shall we do else? Do you esteem men by their number rather than by their valor and prowess? With this he cried out, Charge, devils, charge! Which when the enemies heard, they thought certainly that they had been very devils, and therefore even then began all of them to run away as hard as they could drive. Drawforth only excepted, who immediately settled his lance on its rest, and therewith hit the monk with all his force on the very middle of its breast. But coming against his horrific frock, the point of iron being with the blow either broke off or blunted, it was in manner of execution, as if he had struck against an anvil with a little wax candle. Then did the monk with his staff of the cross give him such a sturdy thump, and wear it betwixt his neck and shoulders, upon the acromion bone, that he made him lose both sense and motion, and fall down stone dead at his horse's feet. And seeing the sign of the star which he wore scarf-wise, he said unto Gargantua, These men are but priests, which is but the beginning of a monk. By St. John, I am a perfect monk. I will kill them to you like flies. Then he ran after them at a swift and full gallop, till he overtook the rear, and felled them down like tree leaves, striking athwart and alongst every way. Gymnast presently asked Gargantua if they should pursue them. To whom Gargantua answered, By no means, for according to right military discipline, you must never drive your enemy unto despair, for that such a strait doth multiply his force and increase his courage, which was before broken and cast down. Neither is there any better help or outrage of relief for men that are amazed, out of heart, toiled and spent, than to hope for no favor at all. How many victories have been taken out of the hands of the victors by the vanquished, when they would not rest satisfied with reason, but attempt to put all to the sword, and totally to destroy their enemies, without leaving so much as one to carry home news of the defeat of his fellows. Open therefore unto your enemies all the gates and ways, and make to them a bridge of silver rather than fail, that you may be rid of them. Yea, but, said Gymnast, they have the monk. Have they the monk? Said Gargantua. Upon mine honour, then, it will prove to their cost. But to prevent all dangers, let us not yet retreat, but halt here quietly as in an ambush. For I think I do already understand the policy and judgment of our enemies. They are truly more directed by chance and mere fortune than by good advice and counsel. In the meanwhile, whilst these made a stop under the walnut trees, the monk pursued on the chase, charging all he overtook, and giving quarter to none, until he met with a trooper who carried behind him one of the poor pilgrims, and there would have rifled him. The pilgrim, in hope of relief at the sight of the monk, cried out, Ha! My lord prior, my good friend, my lord prior, save me, I beseech you, save me. Which words being heard by those that rode in the van, they instantly faced about, and seeing there was nobody but the monk, that made this great havoc and slaughter among them, they loaded him with blows as thick as they used to do with an ass with wood. But of all this he felt nothing, especially when they struck upon his frock, his skin was so hard. Then they committed to him 2 of Marshall's men to keep, and looking about saw nobody coming against them, whereupon they thought that Gargantua and his party were fled. Then it was that they rode as hard as they could toward the walnut trees to meet with them, and left the monk there all alone, with his 2 foresaid men to guard him. Gargantua heard the noise and neighing of the horses, and said to his men, Comrades, I hear the track and beating of the enemy's horse feet, and withal perceive that some of them come in a troop and full body against us. Let us rally and close here, then set forward in order, and by this means we shall be able to receive their charge to their loss and our honor. I think, well, this whole thing is a terrible joke, in a way. Chapter 44. This math is getting harder. how the monk rid himself of his keepers, and how Picrochole's forlorn hope was defeated. Oops. The monk, seeing them break off thus without order, conjectured that they were to set upon Gargantua and those that were with him, and was wonderfully grieved that he could not succor them. Then, considering he the countenance of the two keepers in whose custody he was, who would have willingly run after the troops to get some booty and plunder, and were always looking towards the valley unto which they were going. Farther, he syllogized, saying, These men are but badly skilled in matters of war, for they have not required my parole, neither have they taken my sword from me. Suddenly hereafter he drew his brackmard, or horseman's sword, wherewith he gave the keeper which held him on the right side such a sound slash that he cut clean through the jugulary veins, and the sphagoted or transparent arteries of the neck, with the forepart of the throat called the gargarion, or gargarion. You know that thing, right? Even unto the two adenes, which are throat kernels. And redoubling the blow, he opened the spinal marrow betwixt the second and third vertebrae. There fell down that keeper stark dead to the ground. Then the monk, reining his horse to the left, ran upon the other, who, seeing his fellow dead, and the monk to have the advantage of him, cried with a loud voice, Ha, my lord prior, quarter! I yield, my lord prior, quarter! Quarter, my good friend, my lord prior! And the monk cried likewise, My lord posterior, my friend, my lord posterior! Ye shall have it upon your posteriorums. Ha, said the keeper, My lord prior, my minion, my gentle lord prior, I pray God make you an abbot. By the habit, said the monk, which I wear, I will here make you a cardinal. What? Do you use to pay ransoms to religious men? You shall therefore have by and by a red hat of my giving. And the fellow cried, Ha, my lord prior, my lord prior, my lord abbot that shall be, my lord cardinal, my lord all. Ha, no, my lord prior, my good little lord the prior, I yield and deliver myself up to you, and I deliver thee, said the monk, to all the devils in hell. Then at one stroke he cut off his head, cutting his scalp upon the temple bones, and lifting up in the upper part of the skull the two triangulary bones called the syncpital, or the two bones bregmatis, together with a sagittal commissure or dart-like seam which distinguisheth the right side of the head from the left, as also a great part of the coronal or forehead bone, which by terrible blow likewise he cut off the two meninges or films which enwrap the brain, and made a deep wound in the brain's two posterior ventricles, and the cranium or skull abode, hanging upon his shoulders by the skin of the pericranium behind, in form of a doctor's bonnet, black without and red within. Thus fell he down also to the ground stark dead. You're right. Yeah, I'm Lord of the... I can't even. I have run out of evens. I am odd. This is the same monk that basically impaled people like on the cross. Like they climbed up on a tree, so he skewered them in the perineum. And presently the monk gave his horse the spur, and kept the way that the enemy held, who had met with Gargantua and his companions in the broad highway, and were so diminished of their number for the enormous slaughter that Gargantua had made with his great tree amongst them, as also Gymnast, Ponocrates, Eudemon, and the rest, that they began to retreat disorderly and in great haste, as men altogether affrighted and troubled in both sense and understanding, and as if they had seen the very proper species and form of death before their eyes, or rather, as when you see an ass with a briz or gadby under his tail, or fly that stings him, run hither and thither without keeping any path or way, throwing down his load to the ground, breaking his bridle and reins, and taking no breath nor rest, and no man can tell what ails him, for they see not anything touch him. So fled these people destitute of wit, without knowing any cause of flying, only pursued by a panic terror which in their minds they had conceived. The monk, perceiving that their whole intent was to betake themselves to their heels, alighted from his horse and got upon a big large rock which was in the way, and with his great brackmard sword laid such load upon these runaways, and with main strength fetching a compass with his arm without feigning or sparing, slew and overthrew so many that his sword broke in 2 pieces. Then thought he within himself that he had slain and killed sufficiently, and that the rest should escape to carry news. Therefore he took up a battle-axe of those that lay there dead, and got upon the rock again, passing his time to see the enemy thus flying, and to tumble himself amongst the dead bodies, only that he suffered none to carry pike, lance, sword, nor gun with him. And those who carried the pilgrims bound he made to alight, and gave their horses unto the said pilgrims, keeping them there with him under the hedge, and also touched Fawcett, who was then his prisoner. When a man strikes you on the cheek, you just haul off and hit the motherfucker. I mean, that's what you do. Pardon my French. Chapter 45. How the monk carried along with him the pilgrims, and of the good words that Grangousier gave them. This skirmish being ended, Gargantua retreated with his men, excepting the monk, and about the dawning of the day they came unto Grangousier, who in his bed was praying unto God for their safety and victory. And seeing them all safe and sound, he embraced them lovingly, and asked what was become of the monk. Gargantua answered him that without doubt the enemies had the monk. Then have they mischief and ill luck, said Grangousier, which was very true. Therefore it is a common proverb to this day, to give a man the monk, or as in French, lui bailler le moine, when they would express the doing unto one a mischief. When a man hits you in the face, you give him the monk. This makes sense. Then commanded he a good breakfast to be provided for their refreshment. When all was ready, they called Gargantua, but he was so aggrieved that the monk was not to be heard of, that he would neither eat nor drink. In the meanwhile the monk comes, and from the gate of the outer court cries aloud, fresh wine, Gymnast, my friend. Gymnast went out and saw that it was Friar John, who brought along with him 5 pilgrims and touched Fawcett prisoners. Whereupon Gargantua likewise went forth to meet him, and all of them made him the best welcome that possibly they could, brought him before Grangousier, who asked him of all his adventures. The monk told him all, both how he was taken, and how he rid himself of his keepers, of the slaughter he had made by the way, and how he had rescued the pilgrims and brought along with him Captain Touch Fawcett. Then did they all together fall to banqueting most merrily. In the meantime Grangousier asked the pilgrims what countrymen they were, whence they came, and whither they went. Swear to go, in the name of the rest, answered, My sovereign lord, I am Saint Judou in Berry, and this man is of Palval, and this other is of Onzay, and this of Argy, and this of Saint-Nazarin, and this man of Villebrenin. We come from Saint Sebastien near Nantes. We are now returning as best we may by easy journeys. Yea, but, said Grangousier, what went you to do at Saint Sebastien? I mean, you're right, Montrose. We went, said Sweer to go, to offer up unto that saint our vows against the plague. Ah, poor men, said Grangousier, do you think that the plague comes from Saint Sebastian? Yes, truly, answered Sweer to go, our preachers tell us so indeed. But is it so, said Grangousier, do the false prophets teach you such abuses? Do they thus blaspheme the saints and holy men of God, as to make them like unto the devils, who do nothing but hurt unto mankind? As Homer writeth, that the plague was sent into the camp of the Greeks by Apollo, and as the poets feign a great rabble of Vejoves and mischievous gods, so did a certain Caffard or dissembling religionary preach at Sinai, that Saint Anthony sent the fire into men's legs, that Saint Eutropius made men hydropic, Saint Cletus fools, and that Saint Genou made them goutish. But I punished him so exemplarily, though he called me heretic for it, that since that time no such hypocritical rogue durst set his foot within my territories. And truly I wonder that your king should suffer them in their sermons to publish such scandalous doctrine in his dominions. For they deserve to be chastised with greater severity than those who, by magical art or any other device, have brought the pestilence into a country. The pest killeth but the bodies, but such abominable impostors empoison our very souls. As he spake those words, in came the monk very resolute, and asked them, Whence are you, poor wretches? Of Saint Genou, said they. And how, said the monk, does the Abbot Gilligut, the good drinker, and the monks, what cheer make they? By God's body, they'll have a fling at your wives, and breast them to some purpose, whilst you are upon your roaming, rant and gadding pilgrimage. Hey, said Sweer to go, I am not afraid of mine, for he that shall see her by day will never break his neck to come to her in the night time. Oh, snap! Yea, Mary, said the monk, now you have hit it. Let her be as ugly as ever was Proserpina. She will once, by the Lord God, be overturned and get her skin coat shaken, if there dwell any monks near to her. For a good carpenter will make use of any kind of timber. Wow. Let me be peppered with the pox, if you find not all your wives with child at your return. For the very shadow of the steeple of an abbey is fruitful. It is, said Gargantua, like the water of Nilus in Egypt, if you believe Strabo and Pliny. What virtue will there be then, said the monk, in their bullets of concupiscence, their habits, and their bodies? Then, said Grangousier, go your ways, poor men, in the name of God the Creator, to whom I pray to guide you perpetually, and henceforward be not so ready to undertake these idle and unprofitable journeys. Look to your families, labor every man in his vocation, instruct your children, and live as the good apostle St. Paul directeth you, in doing whereof God, his angels and saints, will guard and protect you, and no evil or plague at any time shall befall you. Then Gargantua led them into the hall to take their refection. But the pilgrims did nothing but sigh, and said to Gargantua, O happy is that land which hath such a man for their lord. We have been more edified and instructed by the talk which he had with us, than by all the sermons that were ever preached in our town. That is, said Gargantua, which Plato saith, that those commonwealths are happy, whose rulers philosophate, and whose philosophers rule. Then caused he their wallets to be filled with victuals, and their bottles with wine, and gave unto each of them a horse to ease them upon the way, together with some pence to live by. That was some of the most artistically crass stuff I've read in quite some time. I am pleased and astonished by it. Chapter 46. How Grangousier did very kindly entertain Touchfaucet, his prisoner. Touchfaucet was presented unto Grangousier, and by him examined upon the enterprise and attempt of Picrochole, what it was he could pretend to, or aim at, by the rustling stir and tumultuary coil of this his sudden invasion. Whereunto he answered, that his end and purpose was to conquer all the country, if he could, for the injury done to his cake-bakers. It is too great an undertaking, said Grangousier, and as the proverb is, he that grips too much holds fast but little. The time is now not as formerly to conquer the kingdoms of our neighbor princes, and to build up our own greatness upon the loss of our nearest Christian brother. This imitation of the ancient Herculeses, Alexanders, Hannibals, Scipios, Caesars, and other such heroes is quite contrary to the profession of the gospel of Christ, by which we are commanded to preserve, keep, rule, and govern every man his own country and lands, and not in a hostile manner to invade others, and that which heretofore the barbaros and Saracens called prowess and valor, we do now call robbing, thievery, and wickedness. It would have been more commendable in him to have contained himself within the bounds of his own territories, royally governing them, than to insult and domineer in mine, pillaging and plundering everywhere like a most unmerciful enemy. For by ruling his own with discretion, he might have increased his greatness, but by robbing me, he cannot escape destruction. Go your ways in the name of God, prosecute good enterprises, show your king what is amiss, and never counsel him with regard unto your own particular profit, for the public loss will swallow up the private benefit. Well, there might be a touch of hypocrisy about religious people there, maybe a little bit. tiny bit. I mean, like, every monk other than Monk John was a lying, drinking, philandering, useless, such and such. The one that wasn't, the one that actually followed anything remotely like had monk-like traits, was just sort of a rampaging murder soldier. I can't even find a good adjective, but one heck of a murderer, just a touch, yeah. For context, before Rabelais wrote all this, he was himself a monk, so he might have some strong opinions about that kind of person. Okay, where was I? As for your ransom, I do freely remit it to you, and will that your arms and horse be restored to you. Oh yeah, he definitely saw the inside of the sausage factory. He saw how the sausages were made. And so should good neighbors do, and ancient friends, seeing this our difference is not properly war. As Plato would not have called it war, but sedition, when the Greeks took up arms against one another. And that therefore, when such combustions should arise amongst them, his advice was to behave themselves in the managing of them with all discretion and modesty. Although you call it war, it is but superficial. It entereth not into the closet and inmost cabinet of our hearts. For neither of us have been wronged in his honour, nor is there any question betwixt us in the main, but only how to redress, by the by, some petty faults committed by our men. I mean both your and ours, which, although you knew, you ought to let pass, for these quarrelsome persons deserve rather to be contemned than mentioned, especially seeing I offered them satisfaction according to the wrong. God shall be the just judge of our variances, whom I beseech by death rather than take me out of this life, and to permit me my goods to perish and be destroyed before mine eyes, than that by me or mine he should in any sort be wronged. Excuse me. Montrose, I'm not gonna lie, I would pick the drinking and whoring kind of monk too. That just seems, I mean, maybe you won't live as long, maybe you won't be as healthy as the psychotic killing kind, but what a great time you'd be having. It's making me reconsider some life decisions I made when I was much younger. All right. Now I lost track of where I was. These paragraphs. Okay. These words uttered, he called the monk, and before them all spoke thus to him. Friar John, my good friend, it is you that took prisoner the captain of Touch Faucet here present? Sir, said the monk, seeing himself is here, and that he is of the years of discretion, I had rather you should know it by his confession than by any words of mine. Then, said Touch Faucet, my sovereign lord, it is indeed he that took me, and I do therefore most freely yield myself his prisoner. Have you put him to any ransom? Said Gargantua to the monk. No, said the monk, of that I take no care. How much would you have for having taken him? Nothing, said the monk. I am not swayed by that, nor do I regard it. Then Gargantua commanded that, in presence of Touch Faucet, should be delivered to the monk for taking him the sum of 62,000 saluts, in English money 15,500 pounds, which was done, whilst they made a collation or little banquet to the said Touch Faucet, of whom Gargantua asked if he would stay with him, or if he loved rather to return to his king. Touch Faucet answered that he was content to take whatever course he would advise him to. Then, said Gargantua, return unto your king, and God be with you. Then he gave him an excellent sword of a Vienne blade, with a golden scabbard wrought with vine branch-like flourishes, of fair goldsmith's work, and a collar and neck chain of gold, weighing 702,000 marks, at 8 ounces each, garnished with precious stones of the finest sort, esteemed at 160,000 ducats, and 10,000 crowns more, as an honourable donative, by way of present. And I am teased. I am very, very, very teased. After this talk, Touch Faucet got to his horse, and Gargantua for his safety allowed him the guard of 30 men-at-arms and 60 archers to attend him, under the conduct of Gymnast, to bring him even unto the gate of the rock Clermont, if there were need. As soon as he was gone, the monk restored unto Grangousier the 62,000 salutes which he had received, saying, Sir, it is not as yet the time for you to give such gifts. Stay till this war be at an end, for none can tell what accidents may occur, and war begun without good provision of money beforehand for going through with it, is but as a breathing of strength, and blast that will quickly pass away. Coin is the sinews of war. Well then, said Grangousier, at the end I will content you by some honest recompense, as also all those who shall do me good service. Chapter 47. How Grangousier sent for his legions, and how Touch Faucet slew Rashcalf, and was afterwards executed by the command of Picrochole. About this time, those of Besse, of the Old Market, of St. James Bourg, of the Dragage, of Paris, of the rivers, of the rocks St. Paul, of the Val-Breton, of Poitiers, of the Brehemont, of Claimbridge, of Cravin, of Gramont, of the town at the Badger Holes, of Humes, of Segre, of Huss, of Saint-Laurent, of Panzust, of the Coldreau, of Véron, of Culaine, of Chose, of Varennes, of Bourgueil, of the Bouchard Island, of the Croulet, of Narcé, of Cande, of Montsoreau, and other bordering places, sent ambassadors unto Grangousier to tell him that they were advised of the great wrongs which Picrochole had done him, and in regard of their ancient confederacy, offered him what assistance they could afford, both in men, money, victuals, and ammunition, and other necessaries of war. The money which by joint agreement of them all was sent unto him amounted to 14 millions, 2 crowns and a half of pure gold. And other places. The money which by the joint agreement of them was all sent unto him. No, I did that. The forces wherewith they did assist him consist in 15,000 cuirassiers, 32,000 light horsemen, 49,000 dragoons, and 140,000 volunteer adventurers. These had with them 11,200 cannon, double cannons, long pieces of artillery called basilisks, and smaller-sized ones known by the name of spirals, besides the mortar pieces and grenados. Of pioneers they had 47,000, all victualled and paid for 6 months and 4 days of advance. Which offer Gargantua did not altogether refuse, nor wholly accept of, but giving them hearty thanks, said that he would compose and order the war by such a device, that there should not be found a great need to put so many honest men to the trouble in the managing of it, and therefore was content at the time to give order only for bringing along the legions which he maintained in his ordinary garrison towns, of the Devignard, of Chavigny, of Gravoux, and of the Quinquina, amounting to the number of 2,000 cuirassiers, 6,000 foot soldiers, 26,000 dragoons, attended by 200 pieces of great ordnance, 22,000 pioneers, and 6,000 light horsemen, all drawn up in troops, and so well befitted and accommodated with their commissaries, sutlers, farriers, harness makers, and other such like necessary members in a military camp, so fully instructed in the art of warfare, so perfectly knowing and following their colors, so ready to hear and obey their captains, so nimble to run, so strong at their charging, so prudent in their adventures, and every day so well disciplined, that they seem rather to be a concert of organ pipes, or mutual concord of the wheels of a clock, than an infantry and cavalry, or army of soldiers. Touch Faucet, immediately after his return, presented himself before Picrochole, and related unto him at large all that he had done and seen, and at last endeavored to persuade him with strong and forcible arguments to capitulate and make an agreement with Grangousier, whom he found to be the honestest man in the world, saying further that it was neither right nor reason thus to trouble his neighbors, of whom they had never received anything but good. And in regard of the main point, that they should never be able to go through stitch with that war, but to their great damage and mischief, for the forces of Picrochole were not so considerable but that Grangousier could easily overthrow them. He had not done well speaking when Rashcalf said aloud, "Unhappy is that prince which is by such men served, who are so easily corrupted, as I know Touch Faucet is. For I see his courage so changed that he had willingly joined with our enemies to fight against us and betray us, if they would have received him. But as virtue is of all, both friends and foes, praised and esteemed, so is wickedness soon known and suspected. And although it happens the enemies to make use thereof for their profit, yet have they always the wicked and the traitors in abomination." Touch Faucet, being at these words very impatient, drew out his sword, and therewith ran Rashcalf through the body, a little under the nipple of his left side, whereof he died presently. And pulling back his sword out of his body, said boldly, "So let him perish that shall a faithful servant blame." Picrochole incontinently grew furious, and seeing Touch Faucet's new sword and scabbard so richly diapered with flourishes of most excellent workmanship, said, "Did they give thee this weapon so feloniously therewith to kill before my face my so good friend Rashcalf?" Then immediately commanded he his guard to hew him in pieces, which was instantly done, and that so cruelly that the chamber was all dyed with blood. Afterwards, he appointed the corpse of Rashcalf to be honorably buried, and that of Touch Faucet to be cast over the walls into the ditch. The news of these excessive violences were quickly spread throughout the army, whereupon many began to murmur against Picrochole, in so far that Pinchpenny said to him, "My sovereign lord, I know not what the issue of this enterprise will be. I see your men much dejected, and not well resolved in their minds, by considering that we here very ill provided of victual, and that our number is already much diminished by 3 or 4 sallies. Furthermore, great supplies and recruits come daily into your enemies, but we so moulder away that, if we be once besieged, I do not know how we can escape a total destruction." "Tush, pish," said Picrochole, "you are like the melon eels. You cry before they come to you. Let them come, if they dare." You always need a little bit of excessiveness, I think. It's really, really... I just need a break when I turn on my light. If I dare. I dared. Okay, chapter 48. How Gargantua set upon Picrochole within the rock Clermont, and utterly defeated the army of the said Picrochole. Gargantua had the charge of the whole army, and his father Grangousier stayed in his castle, who, encouraging them with good words, oh my God, excuse me, promised great rewards unto those that should do any notable service. Having thus set forward, as soon as they had gained the pass at the ford of Ved, with boats and bridges speedily made they passed over in a trice. Then, considering the situation of the town, which was on a high and advantageous place, Gargantua thought fit to call his council, and passed that night in deliberation upon what was to be done. But Gymnus said unto him, "My sovereign lord, such is the nature and complexion of the French, that they are worth nothing but at the first push. Then are they more fierce than devils, but if they linger a little and be wearied with delays, they'll soon prove more faint and remiss than women." I mean, it's a French guy talking about the French. I'll let that slide. My opinion is, therefore, that now presently, after your men have taken breath and some small refection, you give order for a resolute assault, that we storm them instantly. His advice was found very good, and for effectuating thereof he brought forth his army into the plain field, and placed the reserves on the skirt or rising marsh, and valiantly got upon the top of the green hillock, even unto the highway which leads to Loudun. Whilst the assault was thus begun, Picrochole's men could not tell what was best, to issue out and receive the assailants, or to keep within the town and not to stir. Himself, in the meantime, without deliberation, sallied forth in a rage with the cavalry of his guard, who were forthwith received and royally entertained with great cannon shot that fell upon them like hail from the high grounds on which the artillery was planted. Whereupon the Gargantuists betook themselves unto the valleys, to give the ordnance leave to play in range with the larger scope. Those of the town defended themselves as well as they could, but their shot passed over us without doing us any hurt at all. Some of Picrochole's men that had escaped our artillery set most fiercely upon our soldiers, but prevailed little, for they were all letten betwixt the files, and there knocked down to the ground, which their fellow soldiers seeing, they would have retreated, but the monk having seized upon the pass by which they were to return, they ran away and fled in all the disorder and confusion that could be imagined. I mean, it's the monk! Some would have pursued after them and followed the chase, but the monk withheld them, apprehending that in their pursuit the pursuers might lose their ranks, and so give occasion to the besieged to sally out of the town upon them. Then, staying there some space, and none coming against him, he sent the Duke Frontist to advise Gargantua to advance toward the hill upon the left hand, to hinder Picrochole's retreat at that gate, which Gargantua did with all expedition, and sent thither 4 brigades under the conduct of Sebast, who had no sooner reached the top of the hill, but they met Picrochole in the teeth, and those that were with him scattered. Then charged they upon them stoutly. They were much endamaged by those who were... Let me try that again. Then charged they upon them stoutly, yet were they much endamaged by those that were upon the walls, who galled them with all manner of shot, both from the great ordnance, small guns, and bows. Which Gargantua perceiving, he went forth with a strong party to their relief, and with his artillery began to thunder so terribly upon that canton of the wall, and so long, that all the strength within the town to maintain and fill up the breach was drawn thither. The monk, seeing that quarter which he kept besieged void of men and competent guards, and in a manner altogether naked and abandoned, did most magnanimously on a sudden lead up his men towards the fort, and never left it till he had got up upon it, knowing that such as to come to the reserve in a conflict bring with them always more fear and terror than those that deal about them with they hands in the fight. Nevertheless, he gave no alarm till all his soldiers had got well within the wall, except for the 200 horsemen, whom he left without to secure his entry. Then did he give a most horrible shout, so did all those who were with him, and immediately thereafter, without resistance, putting to the edge of the sword the guard that was at the gate, they opened it to the horsemen, with whom most furiously they altogether ran towards the east gate, where all the hurly-burly was, and coming close upon them in the rear, overthrew all their forces. The besieged, seeing that the Gargantuists had won the town upon them, and that they were like to be secure in no corner of it, submitted themselves upon the mercy of the monk, and asked for quarter, which the monk very nobly granted to them, yet made them lay down their arms. Then, shutting them up within churches, gave order to seize upon all the staves of the crosses, and placed men at the doors to keep them from coming forth. Then, opening that east gate, he issued it to succor and assist Gargantua. But Picrochole, thinking it had been some relief coming to him from the town, adventured more forwardly than before, and was upon the giving of a most desperate home charge, when Gargantua cried out, "Ha, Friar John! My friend Friar John, you are come in a good hour," which unexpected accident so affrighted Picrochole and his men that, giving all for lost, they betook themselves to their heels, and fled on all hands. Gargantua chased them till they came near Vaugaudry, killing and slaying all the way, and then sounded the retreat. Yeah, actually, I'm with both of you there. I honestly figured it's like he took all the crosses, he locked the church, and then burned them alive or something. It's just, what's wrong with the monk? He actually just took them prisoner and locked them up. Is he feeling okay? Is he, like... Chapter 49. How Picrochole in his flight fell into a great misfortunes, and what Gargantua did after the battle. Picrochole thus fled in despair, towards the Bouchard Island, and in the way to Riviere his horse stumbled and fell down, whereat he on a sudden was so incensed that he with his sword, without more ado, killed him in his collar. Then, not finding any that would remount him, he was about to have taken an ass at the mill that was thereby, but the miller's men did so baste his bones and so soundly bethwack him that they made him both black and blue with strokes. Then stripping him of all his clothes, gave him a scurvy old canvas jacket wherewith to cover his nakedness. Thus went along this poor choleric wretch, who, passing the water at Port Hoc, and relating his misadventurous disasters, was foretold by an old Lourpidon hag that his kingdom should be restored to him at the coming of the Coquelicrans, which he called Coquekriegs. What is become of him since we cannot certainly tell, yet I was told that he is now a porter at Lyons, as testy and pettish in humour as ever he was before, and would always with great lamentation inquiring at all strangers of the coming of the Coquelicrans, expecting assuredly, according to the old woman's prophecy, that at their coming he shall be re-established in his kingdom. The first thing Gargantua did after his return into the town was to call the muster roll of his men, which when he had done, he found that there were very few either killed or wounded, only some few foot of Captain Tolmer's company, and Ponocrates, who was shot with a musket ball through the doublet. Then he caused them all at and in their several posts and divisions to take a little refreshment, which was very plenteously provided for them in the best drink and victuals that could be had for money, and gave order to the treasurers and commissaries of the army to pay for and defray that repast, and that there should be no outrage at all, nor abuse committed in the town, seeing it was his own. And furthermore commanded that immediately after the soldiers had done with eating and drinking for that time sufficiently and to their own heart's desire, a gathering should be beaten for bringing them all together, to be drawn up on the piazza before the castle, there to receive 6 months' pay completely, all of which was done. After this, by his discretion, were brought before him in the said place all those that remained of Picrochole's party, unto whom, in the presence of the princes, nobles, and officers of his court and army, he spoke as followeth. Well, it's not just he got mad at his horse, so he rage killed it, and then he tried to steal an ass from some millers, and the millers are like, "Nuh-uh," like, "No, you don't." Thump, thump, thump. So they basically beat up a king, and then not content with beating him up, stole all his clothes, and then gave him like some crappy jacket, and just said, "Get out of here." Chapter 50. Gargantua's speech to the vanquished. Our forefathers and ancestors of all times have been of this nature and disposition, that, upon the winning of a battle, they have chosen rather, for a sign and memorial of their triumphs and victories, to erect trophies and monuments in the hearts of the vanquished by clemency, than by architecture in the lands which they had conquered. For they did hold in greater estimation the lively remembrance of the men purchased by liberality than the dumb inscription of arches, pillars, and pyramids, subject to the injury of storms and tempests, and to the envy of everyone. You may very well remember of the courtesy which by them was used towards the Bretons in the battle of Saint-Aubin of Cormier, and at the demolishing of Parthenay. You may have heard, and hearing admire, their gentle comportment toward those at the barriers, the barbarians of Spagnola, who had plundered, wasted, and ransacked the maritime borders of Olone and Thalmondois. All this hemisphere of the world was filled with the praises and congratulations which yourselves and your fathers made, when Arfabal, king of Canard, not satisfied with his own fortunes, did most furiously invade the land of Onyx, and with cruel piracies molest all the Armoric islands and confined regions of Brittany. Yet was he in a set naval fight justly taken and vanquished by my father, whom God preserve and protect. But what? Whereas the other kings and emperors, yea, those who entitled themselves Catholics, would have dealt roughly with him, kept him a close prisoner, and put him to an extreme high ransom, he entreated him very courteously, lodged him kindly with himself in his own palace, and out of his incredible mildness and gentle disposition sent him back with a safe conduct, laden with gifts, laden with favors, laden with all offices of friendship. What fell out upon it? Being returned into his country, he called a parliament, where all the princes and states of his kingdom being assembled, he showed them the humanity which he had found in us, and therefore wished them to take such course by way of compensation therein, as that the whole world might be edified by the example, as well of their honest graciousness to us as of our gracious honesty towards them. The result hereof was that it was voted and decreed by a unanimous consent that they should offer up entirely their lands, dominions, and kingdoms to be disposed of by us according to our pleasure. Arfabal in his own person presently returned with 9,038 great ships of burden, bringing with him the treasures not only of his house and royal lineage, but almost of all the country besides. For he, embarking himself to set sail with a west-northeast wind, everyone in heaps did cast into the ship gold, silver, rings, jewels, spices, drugs, and aromatical perfumes, parrots, pelicans, monkeys, civet cats, black-spotted weasels, porcupines, etc. He was accounted no good mother's son that did not cast in all the rare and precious things that he had. Being safely arrived, he came to my said father and would have kissed his feet. That action was found too submissively low, and therefore was not permitted, but in exchange he was most cordially embraced. Well, you tell the pelican there's a baby on board. That's how you do it, just so you know. He offered his presents. They were not received, because they were too excessive. He yielded himself voluntarily a servant and vassal, and was content his whole posterity should be liable to the same bondage. This was not accepted of, because it seemed not equitable. He surrendered, by virtue of the decree of his great parliamentary council, his whole countries and kingdoms to him, offering the deed and conveyance, signed, sealed, and ratified by all those that were concerned in it. This was altogether refused, and the parchments cast into the fire. In end, this free goodwill and simple meaning of the Canarians wrought such tenderness in my father's heart that he could not abstain from shedding tears, and he wept most profusely. Then, by choice words very congruously adapted, strove what he could to diminish the estimation of the good offices which he had done them, saying that any courtesy he had conferred upon them was not worth a rush, and what favor soever he had shown them he was bound to do it. But so much the more did Arfabal augment the repute thereof. What was the issue? Whereas for his ransoms, in the great extremity of rigor and most tyrannical dealing, could not have been exacted above 20 times 100,000 crowns, and his eldest sons detained as hostages till that sum had been paid. They made themselves perpetual tributaries, and obliged to give us every year 2 millions of gold at 24 carats fine. The first year we received the whole sum of 2 millions. The second year of their own accord they paid us freely 320,000 crowns. The third year 620,000. The fourth year 3 millions, and do so increase it always out of their own goodwill, that we shall be constrained to forbid them to bring us any more. This is the nature of gratitude and true thankfulness. For time, which gnaws and diminisheth all things else, augments and increaseth benefits, because a noble action of liberality, done to a man of reason, doth grow continuously by his generous thinking of it and remembering it. Being unwilling, therefore, any way to degenerate you from the hereditary mildness and clemency of my parents, I do now forgive you, deliver you from all fines and imprisonments, fully release you, set you at liberty, and every way make you as frank and free as ever you were before. Moreover, at your going out of the gate, you shall have every one of you 3 months' pay to bring you home into your houses and families, and shall have a safe convoy of 600 cuirassiers and 8,000 foot, under the conduct of Alexander, a squire of my body, that the clubmen of the country may not do you any injury. God be with you. I am sorry from my heart that Picrochole is not here, for I would have given him to understand that this war was undertaken against my will, without any hope to increase either my goods or renown. But seeing he is lost, and that no man can tell me where nor how he went away, it is my will that his kingdom remain entire to his son, who, because he is too young, he being not yet full 5 years old, shall be brought up and instructed by the ancient princes and learned men of the kingdom. And because a realm thus desolate may easily come to ruin, if the covetousness and avarice of those who by their places are obliged to administer justice in it be not curbed and restrained, I ordain and have it, and will have it so, that Ponocrates be overseer and superintendent above all his governors, with whatever power and authority is requisite thereto, and that he be continually with the child until he find him able and capable to rule and govern by himself. And then everybody in the GameStop applauded. Now, I must tell you that you are to understand how a too feeble and dissolute facility in pardoning evildoers giveth them occasion to commit wickedness afterwards more readily upon this pernicious confidence of receiving favor. I consider that Moses, the meekest man that was in his time upon the earth, did severely punish the mutinous and seditious people of Israel. I consider likewise that Julius Caesar, who was so gracious an emperor that Cicero said of him that his fortune had nothing more excellent than he could, and his virtue nothing better than he would always save and pardon every man. He, notwithstanding all this, did in certain places most rigorously punish the authors of the rebellion. After the example of these good men, it is my will and pleasure that you deliver over unto me before you depart hence. First, that fine fellow Marquet, who was the prime cause, origin, and groundwork of this war by his vain presumption and overweening. Secondly, his fellow cake bakers, who were neglective in checking and reprehending his idle, harebrained humor in the instant time. And lastly, all the counselors, captains, officers, and domestics of Picrochole, who had been incendiaries or fomenters of war by provoking, praising, or counseling him to come out of his limits, thus to trouble us. He said cake bakers. I may have said kink bakers, but I'm pretty sure I said cake bakers. I just got to type this up, we're sure. I said cake bakers. Not cake bakers. Okay. No. All right. Well, how are we doing here? There's a bunch more stuff. Well, let's just keep going until we run out of patience or something, shall we? Chapter 51. How the victorious Gargantuists were recompensed after the battle, over and above the 6 months of pay and amazing feast they were given, I guess. When Gargantua had finished his speech, the seditious men of GameStop applauded. I'm just kidding. The seditious men whom he required were delivered up unto him, except Swashbuckler, Dirt Tail, and Small Trash, who ran away. I love that name. Small Trash in particular. Who ran away 6 hours before the battle. One of them so far as to Laniel Neck at one course, another to the valley of Vire, and the third even unto Logroin, without looking back or taking breath, by the way, and 2 of the cake bakers who were slain in the fight. Gargantua did them no other hurt, but that he appointed them to pull at the presses of his printing house, which he had newly set up. Then those who died there he caused to be honorably buried in Black Soil Valley and Burn Hagfield, and gave order that the wounded should be dressed and had care of in his great hospital or nosocom. After this, considering the great prejudice done to the town and its inhabitants, he reimbursed their charges and repaired all the losses that by their confession upon oath could appear they had sustained, and, for their better defense and security in times coming against all sudden uproars and invasions, commanded a strong citadel to be built there, with a competent garrison to maintain it. At his departure, he did very graciously thank all the soldiers of the brigades that had been at this overthrow, and sent them back to their winter quarters in their several stations and garrisons. The Decumane Legion only accepted, whom in the field on that day he saw do some great exploit, and their captains also, whom he brought along with himself unto Grangousier. At the sight and coming of them, the good man was so joyful that it is not possible fully to describe it. I think I will name my cat Small Trash. Chef's kiss. That's such a good name. He made them a feast, the most magnificent, plentiful, and delicious that ever was seen since the time of the king Ahasuerus. Close enough. Close enough. At the taking up of the table, he distributed amongst them his whole cupboard of plate, which weighed 800,014 bezants. Each bezant is worth 5 pounds English money. Of gold, in great antique vessels, huge pots, large basins, big tasses, cups, goblets, candlesticks, comfit boxes, and other such plate, all of pure massy gold, besides the precious stones, enameling, and workmanship, which by all men's estimations was more worth than the matter of the gold. Then unto every one of them out of his coffers caused he to be given the sum of 1,200,000 crowns ready money. And further, he gave to each of them forever and in perpetuity, unless he should happen to decease without heirs, such castles and neighboring lands of his as were most commodious for them. To Ponocrates he gave the Roque Clermont, to Gymnast the Coudray, to Eudemont, Montpensier, Rivaux, to Tolmer, to Ithibol, Montsoreau, to Acamus, Cand, Valence, to Chiconact, to Gravaux to Sebaste, Quincunay to Alexandre, Legre to Sophron, and so of his other places. How Gargantua caused to be built for the monk the Abbey of Thelem. This is chapter 52. There was left only the monk to provide for, whom Gargantua would have made the abbot of Seville, but he refused it. He would have given him the Abbey of Bourget or of Saint-Florent, which was better, or both, if it pleased him, but the monk gave him a very peremptory answer, that he would never take upon him the charge nor government of monks. For how shall I be able, said he, to rule over others that have not full power and command of myself? If you think I have done you, or may hereafter do any acceptable service, give me leave to found an abbey after my own mind and fancy. The motion pleased Gargantua very well, who thereupon him offered him all the country of Thelem by the river of Loire, till within 2 leagues of the great forest of Port-Au. The monk then requested Gargantua to institute his religious order contrary to all others. First, then, said Gargantua, you must not build a wall about your convent, for all other abbeys are strong-walled and mured about. The Abbey of Pleasure. I would have called it the Abbey of... Oh, man, I've already forgotten the word. Anyway, the joke's gone. I hate it now. I'm moving on. See, said the monk, and not without cause, seeing wall and mur signify but one and the same thing. Okay, mur is wall in French, by the way, so you know. Whereas there is mur before and mur behind, there is stone of murmur, envy, and mutual conspiracy. Moreover, seeing there are certain convents in the world whereof the custom is, if any woman come in, I mean chaste and honest women, they immediately sweep the ground which they have trod upon. Therefore it was ordained that if any man or woman entered into religious orders should by chance come within this new abbey, all the rooms should be thoroughly washed and cleansed through which they had passed. And because in all other monasteries and nunneries all is compassed, limited, and regulated by hours, it was decreed that in this new structure there should be neither clock nor dial, but that according to the opportunities and incident occasions all their hours should be disposed of. For, said Gargantua, the greatest loss of time that I know is to count the hours. What good comes of it? Nor can there be any greater dotage in the world than for one to guide and direct his courses by the sound of a bell, and not by his own judgment and discretion. I'm kind of getting that vibe. It's like, yeah, just come in, just do whatever. It's fine. Item. Because at that time they put no women into nunneries, but such as were either purblind, blinkards, lame, crooked, ill-favored, misshapen, fools, senseless, spoiled, or corrupt, nor encloistered any men but those that were either sickly, subject to defluxions. Oh, I don't like that. Ill-bred louts, simple sots, or peevish trouble houses. But to the purpose, said the monk. A woman that is neither fair nor good, to what use serves she? To make a nun of, said Gargantua. Yea, said the monk, and to make shirts and smocks. Therefore was it ordained that into this religious order should be admitted no women that were not fair, well-featured, and of a sweet disposition, nor men that were not comely, personable, and well-conditioned. Oh, wow. This sounds like the House of Chad now or something. Item. Because in the convents of women, men come in not but underhand, privily, and by stealth. It was therefore enacted that in this house there shall be no women in case there be not men, nor men in case there be not women. Item. Because both men and women that are received into religious orders after the expiring of their novitiate or probation year were constrained and forced perpetually to stay there all the days of their life, it was therefore ordered that all whatever, men or women, admitted within this alley, should have full leave to depart with peace and contentment whensoever it should seem good to them to do so. Item. For that the religious men and women did ordinarily make 3 vows, to wit, those of chastity, poverty, and obedience. It was therefore constituted and appointed that in this convent they might be honorably married, that they might be rich, and live at liberty. In regard of the legitimate time of the persons to be initiated, and years under and above, which they were not capable of reception, the women were to be admitted from 10 till 15, and the men from 12 till 18. Well, no, it's basically like his rules were, because if you've got women, then men are going to sneak in, and presumably women might sneak in if there were men. There should be no men nor women. Period. And also only pretty ones. I mean, men or women. You say that, but I don't see a problem with it. I think there's a band that wrote a song about that. I'm tired of that joke too. I mean, I'm bored of myself with it. All right, chapter 53. Well, I was thinking of the B-52s. Here is a monk. He kills people. Look at him clubbing. Smack him in the taint. The death monk, he's a murderous bastard. All right. Okay, now I'm really, really done. Chapter 53. How the Abbey of the Thelemites was built and endowed. For the fabric and furniture of the abbey, Gargantua caused to be delivered out in ready money 720,830 of those golden rams of berry, which have a sheep stamped on the one side and a flowered cross on the other. And for every year, until the whole work were completed, he allotted 69,000 crowns of the sun, and as many of the 7 stars, to be charged upon the receipt of the custom. For the foundation and maintenance thereof forever, he settled a perpetual fee farm rent of 23,9,514 rose nobles, exempted from all homage, fealty, service, or burden whatsoever, and payable every year at the gate of the abbey. Oh, excuse me again, I'm begging your pardon. And of this by letters patent, passed a very good grant. The architecture was in a figure hexagonal, and in such a fashion that in every one of the 6 corners there was built a great round tower of 80 foot in diameter, and were all of a like form and bigness. Upon the north side ran along the river of Loire on the bank whereof was situated the tower called Arctic. Going towards the east, there was another called Caler, the next following Anatole, the next Messembrine, or Messembrine, the next Hesperia, and the last Criere. Every tower was distant from the other the space of 312 paces. The whole edifice was everywhere 6 stories high, reckoning the cellars underground for one. The second was arched after the fashion of a basket handle. The rest were sealed with pure wainscot, flourished with Flanders fretwork, in the form of the foot of a lamp, and covered above with fine slates, with an endorsement of lead, carrying the antique figures of little puppets and animals of all sorts, notably well suited to one another, and gilt, together with the gutters, which, jutting without the walls from betwixt the crossbars and a diagonal figure, painted with golden azure, reached to the very ground, where they ended into great conduit pipes, which carried all the way unto the river from under the house. I guess if there's ever need for the B-53s, I got it covered, huh? Self-flattery! This same building was 100 times more sumptuous and magnificent than ever was Bonnivet, Chambourg, or Chantilly, for there were in it 9,332 chambers, every one whereof had a withdrawing room, a handsome closet, a wardrobe, an oratory, and neat passage, leading into a great and spacious hall. Between every tower, in the midst of the said body of building, there was a pair of winding, such as now we call lantern stairs, whereof the steps were part of the porphyry, which is a dark red marble spotted with white, a part of Numidian stone, which is a kind of yellowishly streaked marble upon various colors, and part of serpentine marble, with light spots on a dark green ground, each of those steps being 22 foot in length and 3 fingers thick, and the just number of 12 betwixt every rest, or as we now term it, landing place. In every resting place were 2 fair antique arches where the light came in, and by those they went into a cabinet made even with and of the breadth of the said winding. And the reascending above the roofs of the house ended conically in a pavilion. By that vice or winding, they entered on every side into a great hall, and from the halls into the chambers. From the Arctic Tower unto the Criere were the fair great libraries in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French, Italian, and Spanish, respectively distributed in their several cantons, according to the diversity of these languages. In the midst there was a wonderful scalier, or winding stair, the entry whereof was without the house, in a vault or arch 6 fathom broad. But no English. It was made in such symmetry and largeness that 6 men-at-arms with their lances in their rests might together and abreast ride all the way to the very top of all the palace. From the Tower Anatole to the Messembrine were fair spacious galleries, all colored over and painted with the ancient prowesses, histories, and descriptions of the world. In the midst thereof there was likewise such another ascent and gate as we said there was on the riverside. Upon that gate was written in great antique letters that which followeth. Chapter 54. The inscription set upon the great gate of Theleme. Oh, I'm kind of looking forward to this. This looks good. Here enter not vile bigots, hypocrites, externally devoted apes, base snites, puffed up, wry-necked beasts, worse than the Huns, or Ostrogoths, forerunners of baboons, cursed snakes, dissembled varlets, seeming saints, slipshod caffards, beggars pretending wants, fat chuff cats. We have a video of a chuff cat, by the way. Small feast knockers, doltish gulls, out-strouting clusterfists, contentious bulls, fomenters of divisions and debates, elsewhere, not here, make sale of your deceits. Your filthy trumperies, stuffed with pernicious lies, not worth a bubble, but would do but a trouble, our earthly paradise, your filthy trumperies. Well, it should have been trumperies, but, you know, it kind of falls down when you translate it from the French. Here enter not attorneys, barristers, nor bridle-champing law practitioners. Clerks, commissionaries, scribes, not Pharisees, wilful disturbers of the people's ease, judges, destroyers with an unjust breath, of honest men like dogs, even unto death. Your salary is at the gibbet foot. Go drink there, for we do not fly out on these excessive courses which may draw, awaiting on your courts by suits in law. Lawsuits, debates, and wrangling. Here, hence are exiled and jangling. Here we are very frolic and merry, and free from all entangling, lawsuits, debates, and wrangling. This kind of feels like a... Jeez. I'm forgetting that really annoying poem for him. That jolly good man from Nantucket. Limerick. There we go. I don't know. I mean, honestly, monstrous, you don't want a chuff cat. If you think cat breath is bad, what comes out the other end is worse. Or so I hear. I mean, a friend told me. Here enter not base pinching usurers, pell flickers, everlasting gatherers, gold graspers, cold coin gripers, gulpers of mists, niggish deformed sots, who, though your chests vast sums of money should you to afford, would nevertheless add more unto that hoard, and yet not be content, you clench-fist dastards, insatiable fiends, and Pluto's bastards, greedy devourers, cheechy sneak-billed rogues, hell mastiffs gnaw your bones, you ravenous dogs. You beastly-looking fellows, reason doth plainly tell us that we should not to you allot room here but at the gallows, you beastly-looking fellows. Here enter not fond makers of demurs, in love adventurers, peevish jealous curs, sad pensive dotards, raisers of garboils, hags, goblins, ghosts, firebrands of household broils, nor drunkards, liars, cowards, cheaters, clowns, thieves, cannibals, faces overcast with frowns, nor lazy slugs, envious, covetous, nor blockish, cruel, nor too credulous. Here mangy, pocky folks shall have no place, no ugly lusks, no persons of disgrace. Grace, honor, praise, delight, here sojourn day and night, sound bodies lined with a good mind, to here pursue with might, grace, honor, praise, delight. I'm starting to feel like I'm casting a spell of magic or something. Here enter you, and welcome from our hearts, all noble sparks, endowed with gallant parts. This is the glorious place, which bravely shall afford, wherewith to entertain you all. Were you 1,000? Here you shall not want for anything, for what you'll ask we'll grant. Stay here, you lively, jovial, handsome, brisk, gay, witty, frolic, cheerful, merry, frisk, spruce, jocund, courteous, further of trades, and in a word, all worthy gentle blades. Blades of heroic breasts shall taste here of the feasts, both privily and civilly of those celestial guests, blades of the heroic breasts. I guess that should be fests, not feasts, then to get it to all rhyme up. Sorry about that. Shall taste here of the fests, even though fest was spelled with an A too. Here enter you, pure, honest, faithful, true expounders of the scriptures old and new, whose glosses do not blind our reason, but make it to see the clearer, who shut its passages from hatred, avarice, pride, factions, covenants, and all sorts of vice. Come, settle here a charitable faith, which neighborly affection nourisheth, and whose light chaseth all corrupters hence, of the blessed word, from the aforesaid sense. The holy word, may it always afford to all us in common, both man and woman, a spiritual shield and sword, the sacred holy word. All right, I guess it should have been ward because it was a ford and sword. So, the sacred holy ward. Here enter you, all ladies of high birth, delicious, stately, charming, full of mirth, ingenious, lovely, mignard, proper, fair, magnetic, graceful, splendid, pleasant, rare, obliging, sprightly, virtuous, young, salacious, kind, neat, quick, feat, bright, compt, ripe, choice, dear, precious, alluring, courtly, comely, fine, complete, wise, personable, ravishing, and sweet. Let me put my thesaurus away. Come, joys, enjoy. The Lord Celestial hath given us... Blah, blah, blah. The Lord Celestial hath given enough wherewith to please us all. Gold give us, God forgive us, and from all woes relieve us, that we the treasure and may reap of pleasure, and shun whatever is grievous. Gold give us, God forgive us. Well, you know, if you kind of wanted to keep stuff to yourself, you just write this great... Basically, you make it sort of like an EULA, and just give a little scroll bar. You scroll down. Do you agree to all of the above? Check here. Boom. It's not like anybody else reads these things these days, right? Chapter 55. What manner of dwelling the Thelemites had. I'd really like to finish with this monk, honestly. In the middle of the lower court there was a stately fountain of fair alabaster. Upon the top thereof stood the three graces, with their cornucopias or horns of abundance, and did jet out the water at their breasts, mouth, ears, eyes, and other open passages of the body. You know. We shouldn't have to name them. The inside of the buildings in this lower court stood upon great pillars of chalcedony stone and porphyry marble made archways after a goodly antique fashion. Within those were spacious galleries, long and large, adorned with curious pictures, the horns of bucks and unicorns, with rhinoceroses, water horses called the hippopotams, the teeth and tusks of elephants, and other things well worth the beholding. The lodging of the ladies, for so we may call those gallant women, took up all from the tower Arctic unto the gate Messembrine. The men possessed the rest. Before the said lodging of the ladies, that they might have their recreation, between the first two towers, on the outside were placed the tilt-yard, the barriers or lists for tournaments, the hippodrome or riding court, the theatre or public playhouse, and the natatori, or place to swim in, with the most admirable baths in 3 stages, situated above one another, well furnished with all necessary accommodation, and store of myrtle water. By the riverside was the fair garden of pleasure, and in the midst of that was the glorious labyrinth. Between the 2 other towers were the courts for the tennis and the balloon. Toward the tower Crial stood the orchard full of all fruit trees, set and ranged in a quincuncal order. At the end of that was the great park, abounding with all sorts of venison. Betwixt the third couple of... Wait a sec. Brain just caught up a little bit. Because just imagine you're just sitting in this thing and you just hear... Burp, 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 burp. Presuming that the deer in Valheim are remotely realistic in their sound. Where the F was that venison there? Betwixt the third couple of towers were the butts and marks for shooting with a snapwork gun, an ordinary bow for common archery, or with a crossbow. The office towers were without the tower Hesperia, of 1 story high. The stables were beyond the offices, and before them stood the falconry, managed by ostrich keepers and falconers very expert in the art, and it was yearly supplied and furnished by the Candians, I nearly said Canadians, Venetians, Sarmates now called Muscovaters, with all sorts of most excellent hawks, eagles, gerfalcons, goshawks, sacres, lanners, falcons, sparrowhawks, marlins, and other kinds of them, so gentle and perfectly well managed that, flying of themselves sometimes from the castle for their own disport, they would not fail to catch whatever they encountered. The Veneri, where the beagles and hounds were kept, was a little farther off, drawing towards the park. All the halls, chambers, and closets or cabinets were richly hung with tapestry and hangings of diverse sorts, according to the variety of the seasons of the year. All the pavements and floors were covered with green cloth. The beds were all embroidered. In every back chamber or withdrawing room there was a looking glass of pure crystal set in a frame of fine gold, garnished all about with pearls, and was of such greatness that it would represent to the full the whole lineaments and proposition of the person that stood before it. At the going out of the halls which belonged to the ladies' lodgings were the perfumers and trimmers, through whose hands the gallants passed when they were to visit the ladies. Those sweet artificers did every morning furnish the ladies' chambers with the spirit of roses, orange flower water, and angelica, and to each of them gave a little precious casket vaporing forth the most odoriferous exhalations of the choicest aromatical scents. This is still... Oh my god. All right. I'm committed. Chapter 56. How the men and women of the religious order of Thelem were apparelled. The ladies at the foundation of this order were apparelled after their own pleasure and liking. But, since that of their own accord and free will that they have reformed themselves, their accoutrement is in manner as followeth. They wore stockings of scarlet crimson, or ingrained purple dye, which reached just 3 inches above the knee, having a list beautified with exquisite embroideries and rare incisions of the cutter's art. Their garters were of the color of their bracelets, and circled the knee a little both over and under. Their shoes, pumps, and slippers were either of red, violet, or crimson velvet, pinked and jagged like lobster waddles. Sexy times. When I think lobster, I think sexy. Next to their smock, they put on the pretty kirtle or vasquet of pure silk camlet. Above that went the taffety or tabby farthingale of white, red, tawny, grey, or of any other color. Above this taffety petticoat they had another of cloth of tissue or brocade, embroidered with fine gold and interlaced with needlework, or as they thought good, and according to the temperature and disposition of the weather, had their upper coats of satin, damask, or velvet, and those either orange, tawny, green, ash-colored, blue, yellow, bright red, crimson, or white, and so forth, or had them of cloth of gold, cloth of silver, or some other choice stuff, enriched with pearl, or embroidered according to the dignity of the festival days and times wherein they wore them. Their gowns, being still correspondent to the season, were either of cloth of gold frizzled with a silver raised work, of red satin, covered with gold pearl, of tabby or taffety, white, blue, black, tawny, etc., of silk serge, silk camlet, velvet, cloth of silver, silver tissue, cloth of gold, gold wire, figured velvet, or figured satin tinseled and overcast with golden threads, in diverse, variously purfled drafts. That's 2 words I don't understand together. In the summer, some days, instead of gowns, they wore light, handsome mantles, made either of the stuff of the aforesaid attire, or like Morisco rugs, of violet velvet frizzled, with a raised work of gold upon silver pearl. Or with a knotted cord work of gold embroidery, everywhere garnished with little Indian pearls. They had always carried a fair panache or plume of feathers, of the color of their muff, bravely adorned and tricked out with glistening spangles of gold. In the winter time they had their taffety gowns of all colors, as above named, and those lined with the rich furrings of hind wolves, or speckled lynxes, black-spotted weasels, martlets, skins of Calabria, sables, and other costly furs of an inestimable value. Their beads, rings, bracelets, collars, carcanets, I suppose, and neck chains were all of precious stones, such as carbuncles, rubies, balius, diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, turquoises, garnets, agates, beryls, and excellent marguerites. Their head-dressing also varied with the season of the year, according to which they decked themselves. In winter it was of the French fashion, in the spring of the Spanish, in summer of the fashion of Tuscany, except only upon the holy days and Sundays, at which time they were accoutred in the French mode, because they accounted it more honourable and better befitting of the garb of a matronal pudicity. In short, them ladies be all blinged up. The men were apparelled after their fashion. Their stockings were of tamine or of cloth serge, of white, black, scarlet, or some other ingrained color. Their breeches were of velvet, of the same color with their stockings, or very near, embroidered and cut according to their fancy. Their doublet was of cloth of gold, of cloth of silver, of velvet, satin, damask, taffeties, etc., of the same colors, cut, embroidered, and suitably trimmed up in perfection. The points were of silk of the same colors. The tags were of gold well enameled. Their coats and jerkins were of cloth of gold, cloth of silver, gold, tissue, or velvet embroidered, as they thought fit. Their gowns were every whit as costly as those of the ladies. Their girdles were of silks, of the color of their doublets. Everyone had a gallant sword by his side, the hilt and handle whereof were gilt, and the scabbard of velvet, of the color of his breeches, with a chape of gold in pure goldsmith's work. The dagger was of the same. Their capes and bonnets were of the capes and bonnets were of black velvet, adorned with jewels and buttons of gold. Upon that they wore a white plume, most prettily and minion-like parted by so many rows of gold spangles, at the end of which, whereof hung dangling in a more sparkling resplendency fair rubies, emeralds, diamonds, etc. But there was such a sympathy betwixt the gallants and the ladies, that every day they were apparelled in the same livery. And that they might not miss, there were certain gentlemen appointed to tell the youths every morning what vestments the ladies would on that day wear, for all was done according to the pleasure of the ladies. In these so handsome clothes, and habillement so rich, thinking not that either one or the other of either sex did waste any time at all, for the masters of the wardrobes had all their raiments and apparel so ready for every morning, and the chamber ladies so well skilled, that in a trice they would be dressed and completely in their clothes from head to foot. And to have those accoutrements with the more conveniency, there was about the wood of Theleme a row of houses of the extent of half a league, very neat and cleanly, wherein dwelt the goldsmiths, lapidaries, jewelers, embroiderers, tailors, gold drawers, velvet weavers, tapestry makers, and upholsterers, who wrought there every one in his own trade, and all for the aforesaid jolly friars and nuns of the new stamp. They were furnished with matter and stuff from the hands of the Lord Naciclet, who every year brought them 7 ships from the Perlas and Cannibal Islands, laden with ingots of gold, with raw silk, with pearls and precious stones. And if any marguerites, called unions, began to grow old and lose somewhat of their natural whiteness and luster, those with their art they did renew, by tendering them to eat some pretty cocks, as they used to give casting unto hawks. And thus the men be all blinged up. Well, the thing is about that war is they basically just lost a bunch of money and didn't gain anything from it. But let's not worry about finances. Whew. All right. I think we've got one more chapter for Thelemites, and then I'm going to see how I feel about it. Chapter 52. How the Thelemites were governed, and of their manner of living. I like that sentence you just said there, G. Just taken completely without any context whatsoever. It's just, yes. All their life was spent not in laws, statutes, or rules, but according to their own free will and pleasure. They rose out of their beds when they thought good. They did eat, drink, labor, sleep when they had a mind to it and were disposed for it. None did awaken them. None did offer to constrain them to eat, drink, nor to do any other thing, for so had Gargantua established it. In all the rule and strictest tie of their order, there was but this one clause to be observed. Do what thou wilt. Because men that are free, well-born, well-bred, and conversant in honest companies, have naturally an instinct and spur that prompteth them unto virtuous actions, and withdraws them from vice, which is called honor. Those same men, when by base subjection and constraint they are brought under and kept down, turn aside from that noble disposition by which they formerly were so inclined to virtue, to shake off and break that bond of servitude wherein they are so tyrannously enslaved. For it is agreeable within the nature of man to long after things forbidden, and to desire what is denied us. By this liberty they entered into a very laudable emulation to do all of them what they saw did please one. If any of the gallants or ladies should say, "Let us drink," they would all drink. If any one of them said, "Let us play," they all played. If one of them said, "Let us go a-walking into the fields," they went all. If they were to go a-hawking or a-hunting, the ladies mounted upon dainty well-placed nags, seated in a stately palfrey saddle, carried on their lovely fists, Mignardly begloved every one of them, either a sparrowhawk or a laneret or a marlin, and the young gallants carried the other kinds of hawks. So nobly were they taught that there was neither he nor she amongst them but could read, write, sing, play upon several musical instruments, speak 5 or 6 several languages, and compose in them all very quaintly, both in verse and prose. Never were seen so valiant knights, so noble and worthy, so dexterous and skillful both on foot and a horseback, more brisk and lively, more nimble and quick, or better handling all manner of weapons than were there. Not one. Never were seen ladies so proper and handsome, so mignard and dainty, less froward, or more ready with their hand and with their needle in every honest and free action belonging to that sex than were there. For this reason, when the time came that any man of the said abbey, either at the request of his parents or for some other cause, had a mind to go out of it, he carried along with him one of the ladies, namely, her whom he had before that chosen for his mistress, and they were married together. And if they had formerly in Thelem lived in good devotion and amity, they did continue therein, and increase it to a greater height in their state of matrimony, and did entertain that mutual love till the very last day of their life, in no less vigor and fervency than at the very day of their wedding. And I could tell you 3 more impossible things, but I only have so much time. Here must I not forget to set down unto you a riddle, which is found under the ground as they were laying the foundation of the abbey, engraven in a copper plate, and it was thus as followeth. And then we'll do this, and this is where we're gonna take pause. Chapter 58, a prophetical riddle. Poor mortals who wait for a happy day, cheer up your hearts and hear what I shall say. If it be lawful firmly to believe that the celestial bodies us can give wisdom to judge of things that are not yet, or if from heaven such wisdom maybe I should drink less next time. Or if from heaven such wisdom we may get, as may with confidence make us discourse of years to come, their destiny and course. I to my hearers give to understand that this next winter, though it be at hand, give me many, many beeve. This will be at hand, yea, and before there shall appear a race of men who, loth to sit still in one place, shall boldly go before all people's eyes, suborning men of diverse qualities. I'm going to make it rhyme, so. To draw them unto covenants and sides, in such a manner that, whate'er betides, they'll move you, if you give them ear, no doubt, with both your friends and kindred to fall out. They'll make a vassal to gain stand his lord, and children their own parents in a ward. All reverence shall then be banished. No true respect to others shall be banished? Shall be anyway. They'll say that every man should have his turn, both in his going forth and his return. Banished! I'll go with that. Okay, thank you. Both in his going forth and return. And hereupon there shall arise such woes, such jarring and confused to and fro's, that never were in history such coils, set down as such tumults and garboils. Then shall you many gallant men see by, valor stirred up in youthful fervent sigh, who, trusting too much in their hopeful time, live but a while and perish in their prime. Neither shall any, who this course shall run, leave off the race which he hath once begun, till they the heavens with their noise by their contention have filled, and with their steps the earth's dimension. I don't even know what's going on yet. Then those shall have no less authority, shall have no faith than those that will not lee. Then all shall be governed by a rude, base and ignorant and foolish multitude. The veriest lout of all shall be their judge, or horrible and dangerous deluge. Deluge I call it, and that for good reason, for this shall be omitted in no season. Nor shall the earth of this foul stir be free, till suddenly you in great store shall see. The waters issue out, with those whose streams the most moderate of all shall be moistened, and justly too, because they did not spare the flocks of beasts that innocentest air, but did their sinews and their bowels take, not to the gods a sacrifice to make, but usually to serve themselves for sport. And now consider, I do you exhort, in such commotion so continual, what rest can take the globe terrestrial? Man, that's Tardan. Trying to rhyme terrestrial with continual? The fuck? Alright. Most happy then are they that it can hold, and use it carefully as precious gold, by keeping it in jail, whence it shall have no help but him to being it gave, and to increase his mournful accident. The sun before it set in the Occident shall cease to dart upon it any light, more than in an eclipse or in the night, so that at once its favor shall be gone, and liberty with it be left alone. Well, the translation is reaching. I think we should probably read the original French to really appreciate this, but I don't feel like looking it up. We'll have to endure. And yet, before it shall come to ruin thus, its quaking shall be as impetuous as Aetna's was when Titan's sons lay under, and yield when lost a fearful sound like thunder. And Amaury did not more quickly move when Typhoeus did the vast huge hills remove, and for despite into the sea them threw. I hate that sentence through and through. Thou shalt have it then be lost by ways not few. I hate that sentence almost as much. And change suddenly when those that have it to other men that after come shall leave it. Then shall it be high time to cease from this, so long, so great, so tedious exercise. For the great waters told you now by me will make each think where his retreat shall be. And yet, before that they be clean dispersed, you may behold in the air where naught was erst. The burning heat of a great flame to rise, lick up the water and the enterprise. It resteth after those things to declare, that those shall sit content who chosen air. With all good things and with celestial man, and richly recomposed every man. So you just rhymed man with man. Cut it out. The others at the last all stripped shall be, that after this great work all men shall see, how each shall have his due. This is their lot. Oh, he is worthy praise that shrinketh not. Poetry jail! Actually, I had this urge to get the last little bits of a Wesley Willis song. Rock over Rabelais, rock over France. This is Taco Bell. No sooner was this enigmatical monument read over, but Gargantua, fetching a very deep sigh, said unto those that stood by, It is not now only, I perceive, that people called to the faith of the gospel, and convinced with the certainty of evangelical truths, are persecuted. But happy is that man that shall not be scandalized, but shall always continue to the end in aiming at that mark which God by his dear Son hath set before us, without being distracted or diverted by his carnal affections and depraved nature. The monk then said, What do you think in your conscience is meant and signified by this riddle? What? Said Gargantua. The progress and carrying on of the divine truth. By Saint Goderan, said the monk, that is not my exposition. It is the style of the prophet Merlin, May mark upon it as many grave allegories and glosses as you will, and dote upon it you and the rest of the world as long as you please. For my part, I can conceive no other meaning in it but a description of a set at tennis in dark and obscure terms. The suborners of men are the makers of matches, which are commonly friends. After the two chases are made, he that was in the upper end of the tennis court goeth out, and the other cometh in. They believe the first that saith the ball was over or under the line. The waters are the heats that the players will take until they sweat again. The cords of the rackets are made of the guts of sheep or goats. The globe terrestrial is the tennis ball. After playing, when the game is done, they refresh themselves before a clear fire and change their shirts, and very willingly they make all good cheer, but most merrily those that have gained. And so, farewell. End of book 1. Hot damn. Whew, that was a journey, and this is where I'm going to take pause, and same time next week. That was usually a little longer than I'm doing, but I'm getting back into my stride, shall we say. There are 5 books. We are here, and I don't know if you see where my mouse is, but so there's all this to go. But there are 5 books of this, so we've done roughly 20% of it over 3 sessions. Get you some sleep, and Montrose and everybody else, I hope I'll see you next week. Tomorrow we're gonna do more silly stuff, and as somebody near and dear to me says, goodbye, world.